well. It's just us today. It's a cozy group. So welcome to the June 5th, 2023 Special Board of Education meeting for Arlington Heights District 25. I call the meeting in order for June 5th, 2023, and it is 5:30 p.m. Lana, if you could please call the roll.
Olenichak?
Here.
Neerman?
Here.
Scapalato?
Here.
Jogi?
Here.
Cerniglia?
Here.
Michael?
Here.
Okay, thank you. Will please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Tonight, the board will hear presentations from 4 search firms as we look to embark on our superintendent search. Board members have a list of questions should you need clarification after a presentation. Also, please utilize, you'll see the rubric as well at your seat and complete it for each presentation. Today, we're going to try our best to stick to a tight timeline tonight, so we've allotted 20 minutes for each presentation and 10 to 15 minutes for board questions, and we'll have a little break in case we need it, just in case, between search firms this evening. So our first presentation, and before I get started with that, any questions before I welcome our first search firm here, as far as the process we're going to embark on today? So you all have a copy of the questions, correct? Yep, and you'll have a copy of the rubric as well for your note-taking. Any other questions before we get started? We're very excited. You guys are the lucky first ones to be here. So we get to kick off the process with you today. So our first presentation is from McPherson and Jacobson. Welcome, Dr. Judy St. Clair Stein, and the floor is yours, and Dr. Walt Cooper.
Thank you so much for having us. We're delighted to be here. We're going to do our very best to stick to the 20-minute timeline. And the first thing that I want to say to you this evening is that your motto, "Together today to transform tomorrow," speaks to us. We would like to be together with you today and try to help you transform tomorrow as you select your next superintendent. We believe every student is entitled to a high-quality education, and it is our mission to ensure that the search results in a quality new leader for your district. You can see that we are a well-established national search firm. We have a nationwide network of over 130 consultants, and we are national recruiters trying to work together with you. But I also want to point out that we bring a local flavor, and I am very delighted to be back in Chicago. I feel like I'm back home because I started my administrative career here in Chicagoland. I was an assistant principal in the Highland Park School District, District 108, and then I became a principal there. I was in Chicago for 6 years, in what is now North Shore School District 112. And flying into Chicago today and landing and driving through Chicago, I felt like I was home. I even said to Walt, you know, it's been a while since I drove in Chicago, but we still drive the same here in Chicago like we did many years ago. So it's good to be home, and glad to be here. As I said, I started my administrative career in Highland Park. I was a teacher in the St. Louis area first, and then moved to Chicago and joined the Highland Park School District. I was a principal there. I was a principal in the St. Louis area, and then became an assistant superintendent for human resources in 2 different districts in the St. Louis area. One was more of an urban school district, and the other one was a very affluent school district, very similar in demographics to Highland Park. In that district, the Ladue School District, I also was superintendent before I retired. In my retirement, which happened 10 years ago, I continue to work with school districts on various personnel matters, and one of my most favorite things is to lead superintendent searches with McPherson and Jacobson. So I'm delighted to be with you today, and I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Walt Cooper, who's going to share a little bit about himself and continue on with our presentation.
Thank you, Judy. Good evening. My name is Walt Cooper. I come to you from Colorado Springs, Colorado. I am a retired superintendent of 21 years in Colorado Springs and have been working with McPherson Jacobson. Actually got connected with McPherson Jacobson as my Board of Education hired them to seek my replacement upon my retirement. And that was my introduction to the firm and connection to doing superintendent searches. I just recently concluded a search for the Colorado Commissioner of Education at statewide level, and also with the Nebraska State Board of Education, Nebraska Commissioner of Education. And so we have a very significant outreach, as Judy said, with our national recruiters as well as our consultants across the country. We'll talk about that in just a minute as to why we think that's an important facet. But it's a privilege for me to be here and to share what McPherson Jacobson and our team can bring to you in this search, because preaching to the choir obviously, but there's no more critical decision for you all to make than hiring the right person. There are a lot of people out there that can do this job, and not everybody can do this job everywhere. And so not only do you want to make sure that you hire a very talented individual, you want to make sure that that individual is the right fit for your district. And so we look forward to hopefully being able to partner with you in that endeavor. So excuse me. Three things that we really think set McPherson Jacobson apart and that we pride ourselves on most. Number one is transparency with clients, which would be you and your constituencies, your public. And so in any personnel process, there are obviously a number of things that need to be maintained in confidence and processes that have to be done confidentially. But outside of that, we really think it's important that your stakeholders and you are very clear on things like the schedule that we set forth, and the process by which we will launch into this and update folks all along the way. Transparency is really important. Folks today more than ever, right, need to, they may not feel like they need to direct the process, but they need to know about the process. And so we're very committed to that transparency. The second block there talks about authentic engagement with stakeholders. And every firm that you interview today, I'm sure, will talk about stakeholder engagement. Everybody does that. We all know that's important. But the moniker authentic there really is important to us, because we don't want to put you in a position or especially your next superintendent, to be hired under the auspice of, well, yeah, they came out and they talked to us and we did a survey, but none of that information was really listed, right? It was just to make us feel like we really had a part of it. And if we're going to engage stakeholders, we want to make sure that that engagement is authentic, and by authentic we mean both transparent and utilized in the process, and we'll talk a little more about that. And maybe you'll have some questions about how we go about that. But if we're going to spend the time on your behalf engaging with your constituents, we need to make sure that that information is a vital part of this search, however you all choose to use that. And then finally, the track record of our successful placements. Dr. Sklarstein will talk a little bit more about that data point specifically. But our track record speaks for itself. It's objective data. It's nothing that we manipulated. And while we're not naive enough to think there's not some really good luck involved in that track record of our placements, we also think that it's a lot because of what we do at the front end. We make sure the fit's right. We make sure that stakeholders are engaged. We make sure that we do our homework. Because as I said, there are a lot of folks out there that can do this job, a lot of talented individuals, but we need to make sure that the talented individual is in the right place. And by doing our homework up front, we believe that's what makes people stick and speaks to our track record. So you're here today. I don't need to try to sell you on why you should engage a search firm. You probably already know that. I just want to highlight a couple of bullets on the next couple of slides to talk to specifically here. So first of all is the first bullet on the slide that you see up there right now is, and there are three parts to this, right? Structured, transparent, and objective process. I really want to focus on the objectivity of the process. Sometimes you have a lot of talented people, I'm sure, within your district, in your human capital or human resources department, hires people all the time, right? Anybody can collect applications, can post a vacancy, can screen, can do all of that. But sometimes you can't, you know, to use the old cliche, you can't see the forest through the trees. And in a critical role like superintendent, objectivity and along with that transparency is really, really important in the process. So while we will help you, we'll talk about the steps that we'll go through here in just a minute, while we will help you with schedules and all of that sort of stuff logistically. Being objective in that process is really is critical, probably more critical now than it ever has been. The third bullet on this screen, engaging with stakeholders and developing the search criteria, that's information that we do, that we gather up front. Search criteria from you, engaging with stakeholders. And if we do that well, that really does lead to a successful search down the way. And so that's, again, not something that typically folks can do at least as extensively in-house as they can with somebody who does it all the time. And then the top bullet on the next slide, recruiting and vetting candidates with an objective screening process. This is the big separator, right? And so any search firm that you select ought to have this, ought to be able to prove this as their key indicator, right? This leads to the placement data that we would talk about. So it's, you know, there are a number of reputable search firms out there that will do a very, very good job, I'm sure, whoever you select. But one of the things that we always make sure that folks understand is the real benefit to hiring a search firm. You could probably manage most of the other steps in-house through something like this, but the depth to which we can vet and recruit and then vet candidates through our network of 130 folks across the country and the thousand searches that we've done really is a critical piece that we think sets us apart. And so beyond just engaging a search firm, why McPherson Jacobson, there's three really critical things to remember. Number one, we do not hire superintendents. This is your search. We will follow your directives. You ultimately are going to make the selection of the candidate. We're going to bring you a selection of candidates, the best candidates we can possibly find for you to select as a superintendent. We are not going to bring a superintendent candidate to you. We are recruiters of talent. That's what we do best. So if we're lucky enough to come alongside you and work in this, we will go out and recruit the best possible folks across the country. In your own backyard and across the country for this job. And finally, we work for you and only you. So no candidates pay us a fee. We're not a headhunting firm. We don't have a stable of candidates that we're ready to place in various places. We work for you and we follow your direction, and we will craft a very tailored search process to your needs as we learn them going forward from you.
Having worked in the Chicagoland area, I think we are sort of unique here in Chicago because we have elementary districts and we have high school districts, and that is not the case all over the country. So our search needs to be very unique in looking for superintendents who bring that elementary and middle school focus. And so one of the things that we want to do is listed in item number 3, because Walt mentioned on 1 and 2 some of the things that we do to try to really fine-tune things. We want to make sure that we're customizing the search to meet the needs of Arlington Heights District 25. We also are very proud of our track record, if you will. If you look at number 4, nearly 80% of the candidates that districts have hired as a result of working with Mac and Jake are still in the same position after 5 years. Over 50% of candidates hired are still in position after 10 years, and over 40% are still in position after 15 years. We're extremely proud of those statistics because the national average for superintendents in position is 2 to 4 years. So to have that kind of track record, we think speaks to our process and the whole work that we do on the front end to try to make sure that candidates are right for districts when we bring them to the Board of Education. In terms of timeline, we will work with you to develop the timeline. In the proposal that was sent to you was a suggested timeline, but that is absolutely not carved in stone. If selected, one of the first things we will do is work with you to map out the timeline that you envision with our help. Typically, a search lasts 8 to 12 weeks or 2 to 3 months from start to finish. If selected, one of the first things we will want to do is work with you to establish criteria, which takes us to the 5 phases of our search. And in the folders that we put in front of each of your places, there is a spiral-bound book in there. It is the same proposal that you received that was emailed to you. However, I'd like to just draw your attention to page 7, because on page 7, there's a nice chart that lists the 5 phases. And as Walt and I go through and explain the phases to you, you may want to just follow along there because it's clean and it doesn't give a great deal of detail, but it gives you the highlights of each of those phases.
So the chart that's up on the screen now is that same chart with phase 1 and 4 highlighted. I'm going to talk about both of those, but not together. I'm going to come back to this screen in just a minute. But we highlighted this phase 1 and phase 4 on this screen because these are the 2 phases and times that really engage you as the Board of Education in the search process. Now, obviously, interviews and selection is different, but these 2 phases really are the bookends. Phase 1 is when we would come together. If selected, we would do that. Sometimes we do it like the next day, right? Depending on where a board is in their process, the timing of the year, whatever. Sometimes it's set several weeks in the future, whatever. But in phase 1, your proposal document has a more lengthy listing of what we would want to accomplish in phase 1, but it's really when we set the blueprint for the search. So we identify what you really need to see in your next superintendent. We don't tell you the things that make a good superintendent. You tell us what you need. We'll set the schedule. We will get all the information that we need to craft the advertising brochure and the job description. We customize the actual application form itself for each search. So what do you want to say about your district, about Arlington Heights in that both the posting and the application itself? What are the desired characteristics that you most want to see? Because we will put those in the application and ask each candidate to respond to those directly. So it's very difficult for a candidate to cut and paste applications into a McPherson-Jacobson application because we really want to make sure they spend the time researching your district, telling you why they would be a good fit and how their skills align and match. So we don't want to just cut and paste the different, a name and address on the cover letter and have a bunch of letters of application, to dear hiring officials. We really make sure that we put candidates in the place where they have to do their due diligence and their homework as well. We'll determine the salary range with you. Some folks want that posted, some folks don't. But again, we're very flexible. And depending on where we work, right, there are varying state laws that require we do X, Y, or Z as well. But we will determine the advertising venues with you. And when we leave that meeting, we're set to run with the next phases of the work, which is really where we go to work. And Dr. Sklarstein will talk about those here on the next slide.
In phase 2, one of the most significant things in phase 2, and I think one of the hallmarks of our process, is we meet with stakeholders. Every possible stakeholder that you can imagine: parents, community and business leaders, students, administrators, teachers, classified staff. We want to talk with every possible stakeholder and find out from them really what they're looking for in their next superintendent. What are the good things about the community? What are the good things about the school district? What are issues that the new superintendent may need to be aware of? And we think that that's a huge hallmark of our process. We put together a major report that is shared back with the board and ultimately posted on your website. And it really becomes a guiding document for you as a board and your new superintendent as you move forward. There are other things we do in phase 2, but in the interest of time, I'm going to let you look at those bullets and move on to phase 3. In phase 3, sometimes I think that's where the rubber meets the road in terms of where consultants are really working hard, because we are looking at your applicant, at the applicants who have applied for the position. We're looking at how the applicants match the criteria that the board has established, as well as what we heard from stakeholders. As Walt said earlier, there are excellent candidates, but they may not be the fit for Arlington Heights District 25. So we want to make sure that any candidate that we're going to bring forward to the board is someone who matches what you need as a school district. And so those are things that we're doing in phase 3. We also ask candidates who seem to be a match to complete a video interview, which ultimately will be shared with you as a board. That's a very, very brief explanation of what goes on in phases 2 and 3. And I'll turn it back over to Dr. Cooper to talk about phase 4.
Thank you, Judy. So phase 4 now re-engages you as the board. So we have been working with other consultants across the country, just doing what Judy talked about in vetting candidates, identifying candidates, all with the goal of us coming back to you in likely executive session and presenting to you a short list of candidates. Now, in the spirit of full transparency, you also will get a listing and of all candidates who applied. So we don't start with an entire slate of candidates for you. That's not why you hire us, right? You hire us to bring the best candidates to you. But we want to be fully transparent in why we eliminated candidates, as well as why we are bringing forward specific candidates for you to consider. Many times there are some known names on that list, or folks have done their own research and they say, well, gosh, we're really interested in potentially somebody that you didn't have on here. That's great. We can bring them into the mix very easily. So we actually just did that about 4 rounds worth with the Commissioner of Education in Colorado because of the statewide nature of that job and 9 board members. As you might imagine, it was a pretty cumbersome process. But when we come back with you with a short list, you will review the video, the 9 minutes worth of video questions that those candidates have proposed. We will share with you what we've learned in our vetting and our background checks. We'll talk about why we think that person is a good fit. And this can take some time. We'll take as much time as we need to do that, all with the objective of you coming out with identifying your finalist or finalists, depending on what kind of process you choose, for your next superintendency. So this is when we come back with the results of our homework, if you will, and say, okay, now it's time for you all to make some decisions on how we move forward with these candidates in the process. And so following up on phase 4 then is the selection of your candidate. So from phase 4, coming out of phase 4, we'll identify the candidates that you're going to interview, whether those be in public interviews or private, whether it's 1 round or 2, however you all choose to do that. Again, we're very flexible and we want to meet your needs in this process. But once the candidate is selected, phase 5, we have that off to the side in this slide because it's really not part of the search process. Phase 5 happens 60, 90 days or somewhere that's convenient for you after your candidate is selected, and we come back and work through some onboarding and some forward thinking and visioning with you and your superintendent to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So what are your critical expectations in the first 6 months and 12 months of your new superintendent's role? Right? They should know a lot. They're going to have the stakeholder feedback. They've gone through the interviews. They've been hired, they've hopefully done their research before they were hired, right? All of this, so they know a lot, but they don't know everything, and it's important that they know exactly what your expectations are to get this off on the right foot. Doing phase 5 really is another critical point to those retention points that Judy shared with you earlier. Phase 5 is not all of our clients choose to do phase 5. Some of them already are maybe in a strategic planning process, right, that they're stepping into already, or maybe they have a very specific onboarding process that they have followed in the past, which is fine. But phase 5, we think it's so important that is the catalyst for us to providing our 2-year guarantee that says if you finish phase 5 with us, that if that superintendent leaves or you decide to make a choice anytime in the next 2 years, we'll come back and do this for free. So the big question on everybody's mind is, okay, so you have all of these 5 phases and you've told us what you're going to do. What's that going to cost us? So page 23 of your proposal goes into a little more detail here, but at the end of the day, all in is just under $27,000. So you'll see 2 numbers on page 23. One is the fee to McPherson Jacobson. That's set in stone. You know you're going to incur that $18,900 or in change, whatever that is. The rest of it fluctuates a little bit. And those are expenses that really aren't paid directly to McPherson Jacobson consultants. Most of those are pass-throughs. And it really is about where you decide to advertise, how long you decide to advertise, those kinds of things. And then expenses for consultants coming into the district, doing the stakeholder meetings, those kinds of things. So you can see the up to $26,900 includes those things like the 4 most prominent sources of advertising that we use. There are some others that you can pick and choose. Typically we don't do it because we don't get a lot of hits there, but those are the primary spots where we see the most traction. 2 days, two in-person days for consultants to come into the district and meet with stakeholder groups. Consultant travel for phase 1 and phase 4 when we have to be there. If you choose to do more than that, we certainly can accommodate that. If you want, I did a district last spring. I facilitated 14 stakeholder groups over 6 days. And they just chose to do that. They knew that was going to be an additional expense over what was included in here. But again, we pride ourselves on being flexible. So this $26,900 not to exceed gets you a turnkey comprehensive search, although turnkey and comprehensive is it's a continuum. You can get way comprehensive if you choose. So.
And finally, we just want to point out that what makes us different, what makes us stand out. Transparency, sustainability of leadership. But what do I mean by that? Well, as Walt was talking to you about phase 5, when the search is over, we don't just say, thanks a lot, it was great knowing you, Arlington Heights 25. We stay with you. During that first year, we're continually checking in with your new superintendent. We're checking in with you, probably with Dr. Jogi, and making sure that if you're still the board president, making sure things are going well, trying to be there to be of support, because we all want your new superintendent to be very successful. And frankly, this is my style, but if I'm leading a search, I become part of your district. I really do. I want to, for the time that I'm part of the search and working with you, I feel like I'm part of your district. We get to know your staff, your team, Ms. Malik. We are working with your folks, trying to make sure things are going smoothly. And so that is part of that sustainability of leadership. Huge involvement of your stakeholders, trying to make sure that everything is going very smoothly. So thank you very much. We hope we get the opportunity to work with you and together with you to transform everything that's going on tomorrow. We appreciate you inviting us today. Dr. Cooper and I are happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cooper and Dr. Sinclair.
Stein.
Yeah. No, it's, thank you so much. Any questions from my colleagues? I have a couple, but I'm going to, go ahead, Gina.
Thank you, Madam President. I have a couple of questions, and if I overlap anybody, just chime in and I'll shush. So you guys talked in the beginning about objectivity and trying to be incredibly objective. Well, in leadership today, so much of leadership is more about the soft skills and the qualitative. Can you explain to me a little bit about the process of how you objectively measure qualitative behavioral skills, please?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the things that is really beneficial to having, again, remember I said that vetting candidates is probably the most important thing that search firms do, that you couldn't do to the extent internally. And the reason is, if you remember that middle block that talked about 130 consultants across the country, the fact of the matter is we know a lot of candidates across the country for jobs like this, high-profile jobs, like good jobs like this. You're going to get a lot of interest in this position. But if we don't, chances are we know somebody who does, or we know somebody who knows somebody who does through that network of consultants. And so those are the types of questions that we pose to folks. Nobody's going to list a reference in an application who's going to pick up the phone and say, yeah, you know, if I were you, you'd probably want to look a little harder, or you must have a really weak pool. That just isn't going to happen. So while we check and visit with references that are provided, it's that second and third and fourth degree of reference checks and background vetting that we do. And those are the kinds of questions that we can ask of those folks and do ask of those folks, like, you know, have you seen them react under pressure? What do they, you know, what do they do when they're tasked with something that is you know, unpopular, either in the community or unpopular with the Board of Education? And so it's getting folks that really, for lack of a better term, don't have as much skin in the game as primary references might, to really talk about what they've seen or witnessed or have heard reported about candidates. And a lot of those questions aren't around their training in assessment or curriculum evaluation or anything else. It's about how they interact with the board, how they react under pressure, how do they do in the public arena. Because at the end of the day, those are the kinds of things that make the fit, right? You can have all the pedigree in the world academically, but if you're not the right fit, and especially not the right fit affectively, it's not going to go well. So we really do, now, let me say one more thing. We really can't go into that vetting with a blank slate, assuming what's important to you in your district. That's why we do that work in phase one. So once we understand really what is the affective connection and the culture and what is expected in Arlington Heights 25, we can then go out and vet that through candidates. But you're absolutely right that that has got to be one of the primary reports that we come back and say, here's what we've learned about these candidates in this regard.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Cooper. Any other questions? So here's a question for you. Oh, sorry, Gina, go ahead. I know you said multiple questions.
Yeah, multiple.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I wasn't sure if you used any tools, right? Personality, behavioral tools or anything like that. That's kind of what I was looking for.
Well, one of the things we do when we check references is we take those criteria that we will work with you as a board in establishing, and we actually pose questions to all references specific to the criteria that the board has established. And we ask our references to respond to how they see the candidate being able to work under the relation. I'm not responding articulately. We ask the reference to respond how they see the candidate being able to work in relation to the criteria the board has set. In addition, I'm currently completing a search in a district in South Carolina. We learned a lot from our work with stakeholder groups, specifically in relation to that question I mentioned of what issues might the new superintendent be dealing with when he or she comes into the district. And we took what we learned from those issues and crafted questions for the references that get at some of those soft skills. And we're asking that of every reference, because if a person cannot come in and be able to make decisions that are in the right interests of kids, even if it's not a popular decision, for example, then that person cannot manage to be a successful superintendent in that particular district, for example. So I don't know if I'm answering your question or giving you some comfort, but we really want to get at what it is the board's looking for and what did we learn from stakeholders in terms of issues that they're concerned about when we talk with references to make sure that this candidate has the stick-to-itiveness, the backbone to be able to handle a very difficult job. And that gets at some of those soft skills that I think you're referring to as well. Thank you.
And you mentioned stakeholders. Can you give me a little bit, or us a little bit of insight on how you gather the stakeholder groups and the information from the stakeholder groups to ensure we get that wide cast net that you were describing?
Sure.
Without the 14 different stakeholder groups,
yeah.
Incremental investment.
So we would work with Ms. Malik to form or to gather focus groups together that are representative of teachers. And what we want is a teacher group that includes probably someone from all 7 elementaries, from both middle schools, from your early childhood center. Obviously, we can't, if we want a focus group that's about 12 people, we can't have 3 people from every building, but we try to have a representative group so all grade levels are represented, so both genders are represented, so that the different disciplines are represented. We might do one middle school group and one elementary group, for example, something like that. We have a focus group of classified staff, so the different roles of classified staff are represented. Similarly of parents. So we meet with those focus groups and we try to keep them to 10 to 12 people. Then we also hold community meetings that are open to anyone. So just because someone wasn't selected for a focus group, we still hold community meetings. Maybe we'd have one at one of the middle schools and one at the other middle school in an evening. I've even done where I have an evening one and a morning one because we have parents who work and it's easier for them to get to the morning meeting or something like that. And we have an online survey that's completely anonymous. People go to SurveyMonkey and they respond to the same 4 questions that we ask in the focus groups as well as in the open meeting. And so every single person in the community who would like to give feedback has that opportunity. And all of that is gathered, put together in a report similar to the spiral-bound booklet that we gave you today that we provide the board, but it's also in a PDF format that you receive and is emailed to you so that you can look at it and is posted on your website. Does that answer that question?
It does, thank you. Okay, last question.
Okay, sounds good, and we'll wrap it up in a minute.
Okay, last question. So when you find that you don't have the right candidate and the right fit, what is the single largest characteristic that you have come across that causes that fit to not work in the district? What was that lesson learned?
You want to field it?
There we go. This is a very timely question because I just finished one of those. I think the biggest lesson learned is that we need to make sure that in our final conversations and questioning of candidates, we make sure that we step in with them on all of the most critical issues to you as a board, right? So if you think about this just as a funnel, right? We start with this wide net or the mouth of the funnel. And as we get further to the end of this, things get tighter and tighter and tighter. And so we need to make sure that we have crossed all T's and dotted all I's of those things that are most important to you. And so it's driven by you and not driven by the candidate trying to match what you want, if that makes sense, right? They have to be authentic and demonstrable characteristics of the candidate, and not simply that they got just to that very part by being able to answer the questions effectively, if that makes sense, right? We need to, that doesn't happen very often, but I would say when it does happen, that's the primary driver. And I do just want to, I misunderstood your first question about soft skills and affect, because one thing that we do offer, if you choose to do it, it's not part of it's in our proposal, it's not part of the cost. We can do to your selected candidate or final candidates, whatever, we can do the Berkman Leadership Inventory. It's $500 a candidate. It's much like a Myers-Briggs or some of those, the other tools that provides that. I have not found that that's really helpful or beneficial in the vetting and evaluation process. I think there is some real benefit to that as a stepping stone or transition into that phase 5 work. Much like any type of styles inventory or something, when you're bringing together a group for the first time. But that is something that we can facilitate. We don't earn anything from that fee or anything else. We can just facilitate the administration of that if you as a group choose to do it. So I'm sorry I didn't fully understand your question.
Thank you. Any quick questions from other colleagues? So
Madam President?
Yes, Kevin.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, I looked at it. I don't
Could
see
you
it.
just go into a little more detail about how you would communicate with individual members of this board if you were selected to determine how the process would go into effect?
Yes, we typically would communicate through Dr. Jogi, sorry about that, and then she would communicate with the rest of the board if that's the board's pleasure. That's typically what we do. If there's a different preference from the board, then we would work with you to communicate in whatever the board's preference is. There are 2 meetings that we would have with the board. If selected, we would be in touch with you pretty much ASAP upon learning that we were selected to try to schedule the first meeting, which would be to meet and establish those criteria. And I wanted to also reference Ms. Vasso's question. Those criteria get published with the posting and are on the application. So the candidates have to also write to those criteria. So that gives a flavor to us as we're looking at candidates, and to you when we present candidates. They have to speak to how they would address those criteria. So that was an aside. But in terms of communication with you, we would have a meeting in the very near future if selected. And in that meeting, we could talk about your preferred style of communication with the board, what the board's pleasure would be in terms of how we would communicate with you.
Just a follow-up to that, that meeting would be in person with us?
Yes, that meeting would be in person, and then the next meeting that would be in person would be when we would meet with you to present candidates. The other meeting that we typically would have could be virtual, although we would be happy to come in person if that's the board's pleasure, would be for us to present an executive summary to you of what we learned in stakeholder meetings. But typically we have 2 meetings with the board. The first one to establish criteria, the second one to present candidates to you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much for all the information you've provided today. Seeing no other burning questions. We appreciate your time, and thanks. So I'm glad, hopefully you'll get to enjoy a little bit of Chicago. The weather is great.
It is.
And we will definitely be in touch with you. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Cooper. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Brent. Okay, bye. So folks, our next firm is here. So, once you've jotted down those notes, I'm going to go ahead and invite them in, and then we can have our conversation discussion at the end. Okay, sound good? Yes. No, those are guiding questions. Yes, the rubric. Okay, thank you. If you could bring them in, Diane. Appreciate it. Good evening. Good. How are you doing, Dr. Shimp? Good. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Well, we'll let you settle in. Thanks for coming.
And I assume you have all the materials, correct?
We do?
Thank you very much.
Okay. Good evening, Dr. Shimp.
Good evening.
Going to do our best to continue the process as we talk to different firms today. So you have 20 minutes for our presentation this evening, and then we look forward to having a discussion and asking you questions after that. So the floor is all yours.
Very good. Well, thank you for having me. I'm Dr. Tim Shimp. I represent School Exec Connect. It's nice to be back in the area. I actually went to St. Viator, and then spent about 5 years after marriage in Arlington Heights. So it's nice to come back a little bit to where I was as a child. But I'll get right into the presentation. I know you're pressed on time as well. But as you can see, my background, actually, I'm finishing my career as a 11-year superintendent. Prior to that, I was in charge of K-12 teaching and learning, a principal, special ed teacher, counselor. So I've been around for a little bit. This is my seventh search, or I've completed 7 searches with School Exec Connect over the last 4 years. And you see towards the bottom there the different districts, so the variety of unit districts, elementary districts. I'm a certified executive coach, so I do work with colleagues as far as coaching, mentoring, and I'm a part of national and local organizations for my networking. My core competencies, strong in PD. Certainly I'm aware of trends of my role as a superintendent in teaching and learning. I also have been involved in strategic planning, goal setting alignment, and working with aspiring superintendents. Dr. Barbara Sharma Lewis was not able to, she had a personal family conflict this evening that was pre-scheduled. But as you see, she is currently a sitting superintendent, will continue to do so next year up in Diamond Lake. She is also actively involved both at the national and local level as far as her affiliations with organizations, with professional development, with mentoring of aspiring and current leaders in the area and across the country. And she is also an adjunct professor at Concordia and Aurora University. School Exec Connect does pride itself. We try and balance both retired and sitting superintendents. I think there's value in knowing what's currently happening in the role of the superintendency, as well as having those individuals that at times might be more accessible. But we would be the two that are doing the search with Arlington 25. You would be the face that you see here, as well as Dr. Sharma Lewis would be involved from beginning to the end. A little bit about our company. So quite a bit of searches that we've done over the years. We have a 97% success rate. So after the first contract, they're in good standing between the board and the superintendent. We do have an expansive network across the country. As you can see, the amount of consultants that we reach out to and network with, not only in Illinois, but across the country. And then our work with diversity, equity, inclusion. And there's another statistic later, I believe, but you know, our firm, whether it's women or minority, is close to 60%, either women and or minority, which is something that changed ownership 5 or 6 years ago. We've increased significantly. And we also have formal partnerships, as you can see, with a couple of different minority organizations. AASA, which is the superintendent's organization nationally, they have invited School Exec Connect to host a minority workshop at the national conference next February. We believe we're the first firm for AASA that's been given that invitation to do so. All of our searches have been done on time and within budget, and I would encourage you certainly to check our strong references, not only myself, the searches that I have done that you saw on my slide, but across School Exec Connect. I'm going to go through a little bit about the 4 phases of our plan, and I'll talk more if you look on the proposal that we sent ahead of time on page 8. There's 4 different aspects of it, from the relationship side to getting to know your district really, really, really well, and from the stakeholder perspective, from your perspective, and what your needs and desires are as a group. Developing our candidate pool, which we would begin. Actually, Dr. Sharma-Lewis and I have already talked about potential candidates. So we have already started that thought process at least, but certainly once a letter agreement is signed with this board, we would begin that aggressive work and then going through the screening and bringing a slate ultimately to all of you. So as we go through the different phases, the first phase is the opening of the search. And basically once you make your decision, you would sign a letter of agreement with school exec president, and that would initiate the search. We would set up a meeting very shortly, sometime this summer, based upon your schedule, where we would spend the time creating the calendar, basically from August, September until December, or whenever that deadline is that you want to reach. It's very important that we get all of your dates and our dates on the calendar, so we know when those stakeholder meetings are, we know when the board meetings are, when we're going to bring a slate to you, when you're going to interview the slate of candidates. So all of that would happen at the initial planning meeting that would occur sometime, we would hope, by the end of certainly this summer, by August. Then we would get into phase B, which is the superintendent profile. This is where we get into the weeds with your stakeholders. We would host focus groups. Your nine schools, we would anticipate that we would meet with staff at every one of those schools. Especially as we get to the middle school level, we would likely meet with your representatives of your student body. Sometimes that is actually some of the most honest and sincere and desirable conversations that we have. We would look to meet with community leaders, municipality leaders, clergy, fire, police, but all of that would be decided at the initial planning meeting with you. We would come with a list of who we think we would like to meet with, and then we'd get your feedback and say, who are we missing? Who do we want to add to this? So I think when we were in Killdeer, I did up to 20 different focus groups with stakeholder groups. And those were all, well, I shouldn't say all, most of them were face-to-face based upon convenience. Some of them, we had some parent meetings at Saturday mornings on Zoom at 9 a.m. just because it was convenient. So PTOs, all the different organizations, we would come together and we'd do focus groups. And basically we're going to say, what are the strengths of Arlington 25? What are some of the challenges? What would the priorities be for your superintendent in the first year? And then what skills and characteristics are they looking for, and are you looking for in your next leader? You would be the first stakeholder group that we would interview. Typically, I've done it both ways, but typically we would have individual conversations, 45 minutes to an hour with each of you as board members. There are some boards who have decided to come together as one. To do it that way, and that's fine. It's worked perfectly effective. But you would be the first group, and then we'd follow through with all the rest of them. While that's going on, we would anticipate probably a 3-week window for that. We would then simultaneously put a survey out there. And it's a survey that we've created, we've done historically for a couple of years now. There's a number of questions that you would have autonomy on, but we'd like, at least for consistency's sake, keep the questions fairly similar to what we've done, but then giving you autonomy. And again, that would be something at our planning meeting that we would come to you with as a draft, and then we would work with somebody or a couple of people on the board to get feedback, so that when we're ready to go, probably when we get to October or late September, we would get that out. So those things would be going on, focus groups as well as the survey simultaneously. From there, we would get all that data, and then we're going to come together and we're going to dissect and do an analysis and create a report for you of a new superintendent profile. And that would be done probably sometime in October at a board meeting. So we would come present that to you in public. We would have a report. You would have access to some of the more disaggregated data, but the report would be more of a summary for the community and for all of you as to what the community and what your stakeholders are looking for in their next leader. And that's really going to drive the candidate pool that we're looking to find. So when we think about questions, when we think about fit, when we think about who we want to bring to you and who we're going to look for, that profile is going to be significant. That would be posted on your website for transparency, for the community to see, and for the process to make sure that everyone knows when the dates are, what that profile looks like, how the responses will then come together to create something that's very, very tangible to see. Once that's done, and all along while that's going on, we're going to be out there looking for candidates. So when you see the aggressively recruit, connect, and attract, we're going to do that, and we'll talk about structure a little bit at the end. You know, we're going to advertise locally, we're going to advertise nationally based upon the board's desires and what means you want to do that. But certainly we're going to be recruiting both locally as well as nationally through our network of individuals. If you have internal candidates, we would ask that they're going to go through the same process. Although everything would be posted on your website for links to apply, it would go through the School Exec Connect. That gets all of you as board members in the district out of any FOIA potential issues. So we would be the ones that are screening those applicants as they come in throughout the process. We're going to collect, we're going to review, we're going to go against the profile that's been created, and then we're going to do a face-to-face screenings of those individuals. I anticipate, based upon your reputation, the positive reputation you have, that we're going to interview somewhere between 20 and 25 candidates for this role. It's going to be highly sought after. You're in a early spot of you're looking for the following school year, so everything's going to be in your favor. So we anticipate we're going to have a great deal of candidates and interest in this position, both locally as well as nationally. So we will sit and screen those individuals face to face. If we have national ones, we might do a Zoom or a virtual, depending on convenience for them. But typically we like to see the body language. We like to have how do they carry themselves in an interview so that we're doing our due diligence ahead of time. As I said, the internal candidates, we would ask and expect that they would follow the same process. At that planning meeting, we will talk to you about internal candidates. Some boards, when they get to the end, they want to interview as a board all internal candidates. Some say no, treat them as if anyone else. But those are conversations that we will have as those candidates would come forward and if we were faced with that situation. We are also along the way doing background checks and reference checks, both informally and formally. We're not going to bring someone to you that we haven't investigated and thoroughly looked at. Now, there might be people that we eventually bring to you that we're going to give a backstory to that we still think they're a good fit or potential that you should look at. But if there's something going on or something that you should know, we're going to be very transparent and open. We work for you, we represent your district. We're never going to embarrass you, we're never going to put you out there to bring someone forward who's not a good fit or there's something in their past that would potentially be a black eye to all of you. We will not do that. And then we get to the last piece of it is really the first round interviews. We're going to bring a slate to you of typically 5 to 7 candidates who fit your profile. We anticipate as we get towards the end of November, early December, that will happen. We would, based upon your desire, do screening, interview training with all of you prior to the screening. We would work with you or your liaison of the board on questions, making sure that you're prepared for that first round of interviews. There have been times where we've either sat in the interviews or we've been present to greet the candidates, make sure that they're comfortable, make sure that they're walking into. So again, we will talk about the board's desire for all of that, but we will be at your service to the degree that you want us involved as we bring that slate of 5 to 7 to you. From there, you will decide basically the second round. Once you have those 5 to 7, assuming you can narrow it down, you have 3 that you want to bring back for second round. We will talk about that. What type of process does Arlington 25 want to follow? Would you like to have an open process? where it's open to the community, where you have community stakeholders, you have groups of teachers, you have groups of community members, you have groups of students and different committees. Some districts, I believe like Barrington, they didn't do that. They went with a closed process. The board screened all the candidates to the very end until they were named. But again, that's something that we're going to decide as a board. We will decide with all of you as a board and what your desire is and for transparency and community involvement. And from there, you would narrow it down, those three, to basically your final candidate. We would work with you as we get closer to those final three for background checks to make sure that we've started the contract negotiations. As part of the fee that we would pay, we will also do a salary analysis for you so that as we get closer to August, September, we'll be asking you what districts do you want us to compare to that you would want us to do a salary comparison for. So that as you go into those contract negotiations, as we bring candidates forward to you, we can say, here's what their current compensation is, here's what comparables say, and here's, so as a board, you can begin those conversations earlier than later, so we know what candidates are coming to you with, and that you can make a decision. And then we would provide, through our resources, just the ongoing mentoring. Obviously, we have a sitting superintendent with Bhavna. I'm involved. Even next year, I have superintendents and principals that I'm coaching. So I will be staying connected with the organizations that your superintendent will be involved with. And then we'll be checking on you as a board to find out how things are going. I talked to the Elmhurst board president last year just to say, hey, how are things going mid-year? We talked about the evaluation process. So that's something that we would want to have a relationship with all of you to make sure that you're getting what you need from your superintendent and how we can help support going forward. Some of our successes or our guarantees with School Exec Connect. So that time when we come to you with 5 or 7 candidates, if you say, Tim, none of these fit what we're looking for, then we will go back out, obviously no additional cost to you, and we will bring you another slate. And we'll do it within the timeline that we all agree upon and say that, okay, well, we didn't hit the mark, we'll keep going. Also, if they resign within the first 24 months or don't fulfill their contract, then again, we will do that search over again just for expenses, but not anything with the fee that's associated with the search. So if there was lodging for some reason or if there was mileage, that would be it. And then lastly, typically the first 2 contracts, that's typically 6 years. School Exec Connect is never going to come and try and recruit your superintendent that you've placed. We promise we're not going to do that to you. So after 3 years, we're not going to say, hey, come work somewhere else. We know what it means to be, I've been in my district for 11 years as a superintendent. Bhavna's in her 13th year, so we know what longevity means to a school district. And we know the resources that you're putting forth as a board to make sure this is successful and successful for your community. Some of the associated costs, as you were aware from our packet, the consulting fee hasn't changed since we sent that to you. We do advise as we get closer to the end, when you get your final candidates, and depending on timing, it could be all 3 of them, depending on the dates that we select. There's an extensive background check that gets in a little bit more of some of their, from a financial end of things as an individual, that we would suggest that you do at your expense. Most districts have done that. And then we will talk about advertising. Typically, it's going to range between $1,200 to $1,700 total for advertising, depending on what the board decides to do with electronic versus print. Everything from AASA to Ed Week. We do things with IASA, our state superintendent organization, where we do an email blast out to 5,000 districts for superintendents and assistant superintendents, so that's free of charge. But then there are those 2 other organizations, minority organizations that I shared on the previous screen. There's a diversity network for, I think, $149 that you could sign up for. So there's some things that we would talk about at that planning meeting to get your desires for advertising. But again, the range of price is going to be probably around $1,200 to $1,700 at a maximum. And I think this is a slide, I think we are unique, and you're going to hear from probably 3 or 4 different companies tonight. We are going to personalize the experience for you. Just like we do as superintendents, we know how to work for a board. We know how to work with boards that are turning over and personalize our relationship. We know we work for you. I will never embarrass you as a board. I will never speak ill of you. I will represent you in front of candidates in the greatest of lights. And I will make sure that we are working on your behalf when we're interacting with our candidate pool. As I shared, we have a lot of connections, Bob and I, as well as School Connect consultants. I'm very connected with Lake County, DuPage County, Kane County superintendents and assistant superintendents. I'm staying active with LUDA, with IASA, with all the state and national organizations, as Bhavna is. We are involved in mentoring and mentees. As I talked about with our current retired superintendent pool, I think there's a good blend. I think you might hear tonight from some other firms. They might both or all of them be retired superintendents. I think we bring a unique value in a different sense. I know what it means to come out of COVID as a superintendent. I know where things are trending with state and local legislation. So I think there's a level of expertise and uniqueness that we bring to a board and to a community and to candidates. I think the equity, diversity, inclusion is something we pride ourselves in. I know the 7 searches that I've done, 3 of them were minority candidates, the final ones. I think 4 of the final ones were women. And when I think about the finalists, all of them had minority candidates as one of their top 3 that the board ultimately had a choice on. And I think that's really important. And I think when we look at our recent candidate pool from School Exec Connect, I believe close to 60% of the finalists have been either minority and or women candidates. And I think that speaks well to what we're trying to accomplish at School Exec Connect. We held at III last fall a minority aspiring superintendent workshop. Again, I talked about ASA. We're going to do that again at a national level in February. So we are committed to that. Obviously, my partner for this search is a minority background, and she strongly believes in bringing the board the best candidates, but certainly looking at all different candidates from our selection. So we're very proud of that. I know the work that you're doing in your district has certainly been an emphasis as I read about what's going on here. So we want to make sure we value that as well. And I said, I think looking at your strategic plan over the next 4 years and the values that you've set out on the first slide, looking at what you're trying to accomplish through your strategies and indicators of success through your work with ECRA, which I've spent the last 10 years working with. I think I bring a unique perspective and I think a relatability to this role that I can benefit you. And I want to do well by you. I enjoy this. It's great PD for me as a person, but I want to do well by Arlington 25 in your community.
Thanks so much, Tim. I'm going to open it up for questions from my colleagues, and
Sure.
then I have some too. Yeah, go ahead, Gina, and then we'll ask one question, and then we'll move forward.
Okay, thanks, Dr. President. So my biggest question is that when we're looking for a leader, and you're looking at behavioral, which are more qualitative as opposed to quantitative and objective qualities, how do you go about, what approach do you take to measuring those qualitative elements, the soft skills that are really needed for true leadership with objectivity?
You know, I think it's going to be, as we interview, as we go to look at their work production in their current district and their current role and their indicators of success, when we ask them for what are their performance goals this year and what are their areas of focus and their outcomes, that's going to be an area as we talk to them and talk to their references about their successes and their greatest areas of need in those soft skills area. I think it's through the questions that we ask and the responses, everything from, I think you can get through interviews, like you can get to empathy. I think you can get to collaboration. You can, when we talk to the references, even those that, especially those that they don't list, and talk about, you know, when they're union president and how those relationships are. So I think that's the way in which we get to that. is through dialogue, conversation, through work product, through looking at where do they put their priorities with their goals. I can tell you when I did my goals as a superintendent, some of those were built in. When I look at their strategic plan and how are they accomplishing as a superintendent their strategic plan, some of those can be brought into that. I look at your values statements. I see questions that are going to be coming around those value statements and how they're going to create those for Arlington 25 and how they're going to create actionable, intangible ways in which those come to life.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks a lot. Any other questions? Tim, you talked about you had done 20 focus groups in another district. Mm-hmm. What is the ideal number of focus groups, would you say?
I think it can range from 12 to 15, ideally. I think there's just some districts who don't want to leave groups out. And I think there's uniqueness about certain buildings with programs, with culture and climate, where the board's really interested in making sure that all of these schools are represented and all the schools are being heard. Now, it might make sense to bring representatives from the PTOs to, where there's 2 from each of the PTOs together for 1 focus groups or 2 focus groups. Or if you have staff that it makes sense based upon geographic location to say these 2 buildings, elementary schools, we're going to do a focus group, or these 2 middle schools will do 1 focus group of about 12 to 20 people at the most. So it just ideally be 12 to 15.
And do you do these in person?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. There are sometimes we do virtual just for either convenience and or we find we might get more participation based upon childcare for parents or.
Yeah. So that's an option.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Madam President?
Yes. Greg?
Dr. Schimm, could you talk about the balance between confidentiality and transparency throughout the process and how School Exec Connect manages that and helps the board with that
Well,
process?
we will be very confidential. We expect that through the process, and at least until they certainly get to the final 3 candidates, that there is, again, they're going through us, that if there's any references or reach out to any of the board members, that we clarify those expectations up front, that there's communication through one of you back to School Exec Connect, that everything flows through us. The last thing a candidate is going to want is their name out there prior to them having that understanding. We're going to be very clear after our planning meeting at what point might their name become public, whether it's through the committee structure, whether it's, when Geneva did it, they did a public forum with the final 2 candidates that was in the gym. That wasn't shared ahead of time necessarily to the final candidates. So that's going to be something that we expect going into this, that we communicate and have an understanding from all of you. When we get to the committee structure, if there is such a thing, we're going to ask that all the committee members do sign off a confidentiality agreement that talks about that these individuals all have jobs they're going to go back to, at least 2 out of the 3, and that we want to respect that. But it's something that when we talk about that open and close process, I believe that if we can let candidates know that it's going to be a closed process up to the very end, you're going to get more people that will be willing to put their name into the hat, especially if they're successful sitting superintendent or assistant superintendent going into it. So that's going to be very important for School Exec Connect. And from Bhavna and I's standpoint, we're going to be the ones doing the screening. There might be an update to the board, which we typically do every couple of weeks to say, here's how many candidates we have, here's how we're doing. But we're typically not going to get into the weeds of who they are at that point in time or the names of them. And we're going to ask that you would not do that either if you have individuals that are being recommended to you, that those flow through us as a normal process.
Okay. Thanks. Any other questions?
Madam President?
Yes, Kevin.
Dr. Schimpens, and I apologize if you did mention this already. In addition to the stakeholder groups that we were discussing, do you also do any open forums that any members of the community can attend to ask questions or give feedback?
Yes, typically we would, if we do that, we would do one community forum, and then we would do, we could do a staff forum as well, where it's just open to any community member for one of them and any staff member for the other one.
And kind of piggybacking on Kevin, so when you said about the 12:15 and they're in person, over how many days are those meetings?
It would be very quick. It just depends. Like Bob and I could split up and we could say over this given week, we're going to split up after school because it's convenient for staff, and we're going to do those right in a row.
Okay.
Each day, and then the community one could be in the evening right after that.
Okay.
So we're going to schedule them very quickly and within a short period of time over a couple weeks period.
Okay. And I ask because I'm kind of comparing between the different search firms we're hearing from today, so I wanted to kind of see logistically how you make that happen. And one final question. Tim, you had talked about coaching, right? So there's a transition period to make sure that the superintendent is kind of comfortable in the new district and so forth. And are there services that are add-ons that you continue to provide as far as coaching and the kind of 360 evaluation of the superintendent, and then high-performance team development between the superintendent, cabinet, and principals to ensure the superintendent's success in our system?
That would be an add-on?
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking?
Yes. I'm wondering if that is an add-on service.
It would be. When we would have to give you a proposal of sorts. We would, certainly Bob and I are going to be more than happy to help the person transition into the role. And we're certainly going to be happy to stay connected to that individual throughout. Now, if there's something formal, working with the 360s and looking at a coaching cycle that's 8 to 10 sessions throughout the year, then we would have to look at a separate structure for that. But we would be, once that person is named from January through the start of the year, Bob and I will make sure that we're working with that individual, with all of you, to make sure that their setups for success start July 1, and that as we get into the beginning of the school year, we're staying connected with them.
And Tim, do you have experience with this kind of continuous professional development for superintendents?
I do with assistant superintendents and with, yes, informally, and with assistant principals, and correct.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Any other questions, Gina?
Thank you, Madam President. So I want to talk a little bit about a placement that was a misfit. And
A what?
a misfit where it didn't work out for you guys. Can you talk to me a little bit about what characteristic and what caused that blip where it may not have worked out, and what lessons learned you have from that, please?
I don't have one personally.
That's wonderful.
So I know the Barrington superintendent is going back to his home state into a different district. At the end of this year, I believe, he's going back. But I don't have one where I'm aware of any mishaps or where it didn't work out based upon something that I'm aware of.
Okay.
And sometimes we're not, if there was, we're not privy to that, as the board knows.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay, Tim, thank you so much for your time this evening. We'll definitely be in touch with you, and thanks for the informative presentation today.
Thank you, and thank you all, and best of luck, and I hope to hear from you soon.
Thank you.
Yep, have a good night. Thanks for all your communication. I appreciate it. That's fine.
most of it is in your proposal. So I am mainly here to have a face to the company and also to have any questions that you have. All right, is that what you have for?
Yes, correct.
For today?
Hello.
Your eyes will be like glazed over by the time you're finished, so I will get started. Oh. Very good, thank you. So as I start, I love the mic. I'm going to start interpretive dance in a minute, but I need to use this mic right here. Is this better? Oh, all right, very good. Don't give me a mic, man. I like mics. So, yeah, I am going to move around. So, again, my name is Karen Hall, and I'm from St. Louis.
Welcome.
Thank you. Beautiful drive today. I have a Mini Cooper. I had all the windows down, and it was just a beautiful day. So I was very happy to be here, and my neighbors here in Illinois. We've had a lot of great success filling searches here, so it's good to be able to spend some time with you. What you see, the other individuals here is the team. If you choose to work with us, Kathy is in Iowa, and so she does the administrative work. Okay, and that is our main base in Iowa. And then Bridget, my colleague here, she is not a working superintendent, but she's a central office administrator. She's in Michigan. We've done several searches together. And so this is your team, and we would be supporting you. And I'm 4.5 hours away, so I drove today, so I'm close. So who we are, and we elaborated on this a little bit in the report as well, in the proposal. And the main thing that I want to say to you is really our commitment to education. I didn't say much about myself. I'm a retired superintendent, and I've pivoted to the world of higher ed. So I'm a professor at St. Louis University right now, and I'm working with individuals who are aspiring to be principals and superintendents. My doc students, I just was texting one right now, and they're freaking out. It's just like adult learners are so interesting. So that's what I'm doing now, and I also have an LLC on it's educational equity. That's been my work ever since I was in the field. I've been a traditional K-12 educator for 30 years, and so that is what I've developed in that work. So I coach aspiring leaders and sitting leaders to help them begin to do this work in school districts, and then also helping school districts write at equity plans. So that I've been working on. So this is what I do, and part of the reason why I'm doing this is kind of like going full circle, you know? Like I told you, I am a professor in educational leadership right now, and I'm working with people who are leaders currently in the field. So I'm very passionate about education. And especially now, you know, I was very fortunate to have a great career, and I love the work that I do, but I wanted to be in a space where I could give back, where I was young enough and healthy enough to do it. And so it's not that it's over, it's just a different phase. So that is why I'm doing what I'm doing with this energy and knowledge of still being active in education. I'm very active in my community around education and equity. And so I want that energy across the country here to support school boards to find the strongest leaders, your next teammate, because this is critical, and I know this from different angles. And so everyone else that works here in Ray & Associates believes the same as well. And so, as I said, you know, my background is educational equity and in different dimensions of that. And so it's also a value of Ray & Associates, or else I wouldn't be with the group. And I think it's important that we work together closely with our boards to be in alignment with the best superintendent for your community. And because of our background and what we have done throughout the years, because we're the oldest organization that does this work here, And we have a lot of ties and communications and networks in the country. And so it provides us the opportunity to ensure that we have a diverse pool, and we see the value of that. And we also see the value of really pushing each other to think along these lines, okay, we want to make sure that this is the best fit and this is what the board says. So this is one of the values that we have in who we are. And I've also alluded to the fact that we have a deep pool and networks because we've been around for a minute. And also one of our values is building strong relationships with our candidates and with our school districts. Because much, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm just speaking my truth, it's very similar, the process that you will come across from different groups. And, you know, I've been on the other side of the table, and there are certain things that you're looking for, but also you need to feel comfortable with the team. You have to be comfortable with the process, and you need to feel comfortable, and you need to feel that you can trust these folks, the consultants, to give you the process that yields the best fit for you. So what we do is really, like I said, we've been around for quite a while. We have the depth that you need for a candidate pool. We have highly experienced candidates, or not candidates, well, we do candidates, but also associates that are available. And you have the team here that you saw pictures of. But we really work closely with the board. And that is a value because I'm a relational leader, and I believe in making sure that people are seen and heard. And especially for boards, and you're selecting your next superintendent is so important. This is like one of the most important jobs that you will do. And it's huge. And so I see the gravity of that situation, and I want to make sure, and everyone on the team, you feel seen and heard. And you don't have to worry about some of the grunt work, which we're going to, see in the next slide. But yet this is your search, right? So there's that tension there. So let's talk about this process, the input. And I wanted to be really clear when we say that is your search. It is your search because you know your community. But we're the consultants that can navigate and bring things together for you so that you have the best choices in front of you. We work the process. We ensure that you're communicated with regularly so you can decide yes, no, but you're not working through all of, the applications and all of that. We do all that work. And you see in the slide and then also in the proposal in detail about board input, but I want to emphasize that this is so helpful. And one search that I had not too long ago, there was a huge community incident that happened. It was in the school, and the board had to be up in front and present because it was a horrible tragedy that happened in the school district. And they didn't have to worry about all this. This is what the board president, this is the greatest compliment I ever had. He's like, Karen, we didn't have to worry about it because I knew you had it under control. Because they had to come together. So I'll tell you, there was a shooting. It was a horrible thing. And we still had it was time, the leader was retiring and leaving, but they didn't have to worry about all of this. We found a great leader. Because your consultant, Ray and Associates, were listening closely, paying attention to the community input, which is huge, is my favorite part. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And being able to work with candidates Be really clear. This is what this community wants. This is what the community needs. Spend a lot of time with candidates. Because it's not just about the paper. It's about the conversations. Like, where's your heart? Like I said, this work is important. So you don't have time for all of that. That's what we provide for you, is that heart and that passion to make sure the candidates are a good fit. But you lead that part. You tell me, hey, Karen, we're really concerned about X. Or this timeline's not working. It's like, I got you. Okay, let's see what we can do. But I provide you with the structure. I always say this as a superintendent. You need to have structure in order to have flexibility. You need to have an idea of what is in front of you, but if there's room for flexibility, because it happens, like I said, this school district was not expecting this horrific incident that required 150% of their attention together. But they knew exactly what was in front, and because of what was happening, I communicated, gave updates, let them know, and you usually have one person is your designee with me, is typically board president, doesn't have to be though. And that's my point of contact, and we talk regularly. So that that point of contact can regularly communicate with everybody else. You know how that works, like with the superintendent? And it just helps me also know what things are going on your end, so I can be really clear about what I'm doing with the team, Brand Associates team, and then when talking and working with candidates. So the profile is really important. This is this process. This is the very first part when you get into the proposal. It gives great explanation, is how do we gather information about District 25, okay? And tell more about the community. And there's an example of what the visual flyer will look like. In one school district, they even created a video. It was nice, it was slick. But this process is so it was two things. It helps the associates, helps me ensure that individuals who are applying for the position are a good fit. Okay? So that's your paper screening. That's tapping into our networks. We know about some folks that are out there. So that profile process is multidimensional. You get quantitative and qualitative information. So stakeholder groups is those narratives, that rich data that you get. And again, this is your search. So you determine how many stakeholder groups you'd like, because you know your community. So you know how many PTO groups or community groups. This is one school district, they had a lot of nonprofits that wrapped around that community. So they wanted to make sure, for political reasons, you need to work with a lot of the nonprofit organizations. You need to work with the business community. Got to make sure all your staff, you're certified, you're non-certified. And we've had flexibility in terms of meeting those needs. We've been in person, we've done Zoom. We get more stakeholder groups when we have them in Zoom, right? So we do that. We have been able to flex in, gosh, I think we've had up to 30. And we've done it in 3 days. And so what we do with that information is that you look for themes. We type it all up, all the associates, and we come up with the themes. And then when it comes time to present this information, we present it to you, the main themes. And then we have another way to cast a wider net to tap into the community is our little survey, and that's the 31 Qualities Assessment. And so from that, numerically, you could see where the numbers kind of lay out there, and what are the strengths, the things that the community is looking for. And it can disaggregate all that data according to your role. So we give you the link, you put it on your website, you all push it, your administrator who's in charge of that, maybe the individual who set it up over there, and you promote it and ensure that people have an opportunity to have a voice. And so that information, that's all in the same meeting, you get to review and have an analysis of that, and you get it ahead of time, and you get to see what are the top characteristics. We get to interview you, board directors, individually, and we get to hear what is it that you're looking for? What are the strengths? What are the areas of concern for the school district? What are your hopes and dreams? All of this is put together, and it makes your profile. And it's important that your team, that's me, part of your team, we internalize and we get all of this information, because again, this helps us. We're your bridge, right? As I said before, the analysis piece, we're a part of that conversation. We get to hear what you're saying. That helps us when we're out working with potential candidates. Okay? So, again, I was talking about this before. Recruitment is robust. We have a lot of traffic on our website. We're highly regarded out into the world. Like before I became an associate for Rain Associates, I was a member of Rain Associates. I was getting all of their, not that I had a problem I was trying to run, but you know, superintendents are curious. But I was aware of this company and all of their updates. And so it's so helpful, and you build relationships with individuals just by that. But over the years, as I said before, and we have candidates and also associates from across the country that we tap into when necessary, when we, like I said, when we've had these conversations and we begin to do the paper search. Other associates are aware of this, or we go to other associates like, hey, I heard about this, do you know? Or we would have a colleague in the organization say, hey, Karen, I just saw this posting. When I was doing a search, I thought this person would be XX. So we do this all the time. We're in good communication with one another. So as I said before, we screen according to the profile. And the profile is what your community has given input on and what you directly have given input on. And you have approved. So it's highly vetted and transparent and very collaborative. And I love it because it's extremely hands-on for me, and I internalize it, and we talk about it, because we spend a lot of time in the beginning getting that together. So it truly is a representation. And of course, with anyone in these different stages, they're vetted. There's multiple steps to this. There's the paper screening, like I said, where we look at the candidate profile or the board profile. And then the next level, where it's the FBI background checks. There is also a deep dive into social media. Spent a lot of time, I would say, for each candidate that you are going to see for the first time. It's my slate, which is like 10 to 15. We spend approximately 8 hours per candidate before you see them. So what does that mean? I spend time, that's the background check, that's checking references, that's having a conversation with them, and then we type all that up. And then when I come to you and I say, based on the profile that I talked about before, this is what I have for you. And then there is a process on how you develop your first round that you actually want to have a conversation with, your interviews, okay? And no surprises. We don't like surprises. So at least, well, I'm gonna say on average 8 hours per candidate, but actually it's usually more than that. So, as I said before, we present the slate, 10 to 15, 15 is too many, typically. But that is, it's collaborative and a process that we have developed to help you all think to get to the first round when you interview. So when you have about 10 to 12 candidates, we have this matrix, which is the process to help build consensus. So you have had an opportunity, because we give you ahead of time the information, the resume, their background. We now have, and you may have heard about this already, but we have a video. Each candidate will have a 3-minute video. So not only will you have the paperwork that describes who they are, you will also have a videotape or a link, which is nice to see a random question, how they respond, okay? So you will have all of that. That will be your homework, and you'll have to come prepared, and then we will facilitate a conversation to take that slate that I presented, and you'll take it like to 4 or 6. Approximately, right? However you all choose. And
Dr. Hall, I just want to say thanks for the information, and I'll just give you about 2
sure.
more minutes to wrap up so we have good questions for you.
Wonderful. I'm almost there.
Okay.
I appreciate that, because
Yeah.
I need it, because I have a microphone now. And
Yeah,
I'm like, and so you could see that you'll be able to interview, add interview questions. So you can customize those if you like. So here, just someone, board presidents sharing about their experience. Here is just an overview. It's always nice to just give a summary of essentially everything that I've shared with you. And also is in the proposal, so just a snapshot. And thank you so much. So any questions for me?
Thank you, Dr. Hall. Any questions? Gina, do you want to start with questions?
I am happy to start with my questions. So I think you actually presented part of it, but when we're looking at a leader, and we're looking at the fact that the most important thing that comes with a leader is largely those soft skills, those people skills. How do you get to objectively quantify what is fundamentally a qualitative soft skill to be able to start this assessment?
Well, it's all in what you're asking for. And I would say well, I'm not going to say quantitatively, but qualitatively, from having conversations with references and starting off, honestly, with the board and getting really clear on what you need and what you're looking for. And so that is a part of having conversations with references, having conversations with the candidate. And when we're interviewing the candidate, to say, you know, Are they a good listener? Are they empowering others? You know, it depends, because there's different ways to talk about soft skills and what you need here, but that is, we can dig into that and find that for you, but it really starts with, if we sit down and have a conversation for your interview, tell me more about that. And that's where it grows from there. So that's why it's so important, in my opinion, when we're developing that profile, that's where it's all revealed.
Got it. Thank you. Madam President, shall I just clear my list of questions first?
Yeah, and let's see if anybody else, and I'll come right back to you, okay? Anybody else with questions? I have one question, Gina. Let me jump in real quickly. Hey, Dr. Hall, how many Northwest Suburban and Illinois superintendents has your company placed?
So in the past 5 years, there were 11. And since 2007, there were 29. No, 27. Since 2007.
And are you members with IASA and ASA as far as the networks?
Yes. I know AASA. I'm not certain about, is it an Illinois Association that you were making reference to?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not certain about that. I can find out for you, but we are members of AASA, and we are there regularly to be a part of that conference.
Thanks, Dr. Hall. Back to you, Gina.
Okay. Can you talk to me a little bit about your experience and your lessons learned and what causes somebody to potentially not be the right fit, so that we're looking for what are the pitfalls we should be watching out for?
Right. So I would say it's the communication and expectations with your new superintendent. That has been some of the issues, especially if it's a new superintendent, and the onboarding and what that looks like, and being very clear as the needs and what you are expecting the superintendent to do, and to work closely with them so they understand what needs to be done. And then, so it is not common to have a person who has strengths in everything. There's the reason why I paused. And we have to be realistic, and you have to prioritize what you really need. So once you prioritize, then you have to say, okay, so you all just passed a referendum. So you're doing a lot of construction. So is your new person someone who has a lot of strengths in construction right now? I'm just saying. Sure. You don't have to answer it. Is that a priority? But that's a short-term project. So if they don't have it, but they have a lot of strengths, if it's a value, in early childhood education, and you got all the stuff going on with kindergarten, okay, is that important? So if you say, as a value, we really want someone instructionally strong, there are changes happening with kindergarten, you're increasing, the community is feeling a certain kind of way, that is a priority. But we can get support in terms of construction. Or you have someone internally who's already very strong with that. So you have to be clear. So being clear, and you, through this process, when you will begin to understand how to look through the resumes and prioritize, because that's what we do. It's actually a very good question, because we talk about that. Because it's about expectations. And how do you support the superintendent? And is it important to have someone who this is their first time as a superintendent, or do you want someone who has experience? Because you support superintendents differently. But first you have to be really clear as to what you're looking for. And then moving on from there. And how do you clearly communicate, like, the evaluation process? Do you have an evaluation process? You know, will they need a mentor? Will they need a coach? okay? Because you want them to be successful. So I would say the biggest pitfall is when expectations aren't clear within the board. And how are you articulating that to your new superintendent? And what does that look like? Because the person's not going to have everything necessarily. It's all important, and you still need to make sure that is addressed, but it can be done in different ways. Like I said, internally you may have a buildings and grounds administrator or operations person who's got construction covered. It's still on their radar, but it's not so hands-on. What's hands-on? What do they need to have that experience with? So it's just a way to approach that. Okay?
Thank you. I have a curiosity question, but it's not related.
Okay.
Go for it, Gina.
You called yourself a relational leader. Can you give me some color on that? How do you define that? What is that in your eyes?
Well, I want to make sure that people are heard and they're seen. And you can't, and this is general because this is a curiosity because I feel like I'm getting off of Frey and Associates, but it's not about making everyone happy, but it's about ensuring that people feel included and they're a part of the process of the work that we're doing. And I take onus of articulating what is the vision, what's the initiative, and that clarity there. And along the way, people need to engage with that and making sure that I'm accessible in a variety of ways and I'm responsive in a variety of ways so people feel that they're heard.
And you would be the lead on our team?
It has to be decided right now, but I would be happy to if that's okay with you all or however, but yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Dr. Hall, one final question for you. Could you talk a little bit about the onboarding process of how, after we have chosen our next superintendent, what kind of services does Ray and Associates provide to make sure the superintendent's transitioned well, is supported as far as coaching and helping with kind of high-performance team development with the superintendent, the board, cabinet principals?
100%. So that is very flexible in terms of the needs because you wait and see what the needs are of the incoming superintendent, the onboarding, so it's customized. We do have a host of individuals, of associates that have experience with this. So we're there for you, but we leave it open. We don't have packages for folks. We really keep it customized to say, what do you feel that this individual is going to need? Do you all have X available? We will say yes. And then we work out, what that person would need.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hall. Thanks for driving out from St. Louis. We hope you have enjoy Chicago and Arlington Heights while you're here. The weather's great, and we'll definitely be keeping in touch with you and have safe travels back home.
Thank you so much. This was lovely. I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Good evening, Dr. Friedman, Dr. Nolan, and Dr. Yeah. We're going to go with first names too, so we'll be cozy here. We've allotted 20 minutes for your presentation today, so thank you so much for coming, and we'll have questions for you. We're really looking forward to hearing from you today, so thank you for being here.
And it's a little bit different than 10 years ago when Ann and I were here. We were in that little side room. You were new on the board, Rich, at that time. I remember that. And so lots has happened. And I think, Brian, you were also with us at that time, weren't you? Yeah, yeah. We're still around. Think about it. So we're BWP and Associates. I'm Mark Friedman. I'm the president of the organization and the founder. We founded our company in 2006. We'll go into that a few more years in a few minutes. I retired as superintendent in Libertyville Elementary after 17 years. And after that, I took on a couple of interim superintendent jobs, and one next door in District 59. And then I was at Niles Township High Schools and Winnetka Elementary District, and then crowned it off at Hawthorne Elementary in 2018-19, just a couple of years ago in Vernon Hills. So I closed it out, called it a show, and now we're sticking to doing the searches, not really all that willing to do the interim piece, but so all told 20 years of superintendent experience, mostly in the northern suburbs, so very active and very familiar with the area. I live in Buffalo Grove, by the way, so we're right next door. This is a treat, just driving here. Just a treat. Thank you for that treat.
And I'm going to hog the mic a little bit because I tend to talk a little more quietly than Mark and Glenn do. I'm Ann Nolan. Nice to meet all of you. Like my colleagues, I'm a retired superintendent from the suburban area. Education has been my life. You know, I started out at 4, kindergarten, I've never left. So I love education. I love giving back to education like we're doing now and helping you find good leaders to continue the good work. I've been with BWP 15 or so years and very active in searches, mostly in the Illinois area, but also across the Midwest, and the Southeast. So glad to be here tonight, and I'll let Glenn now introduce himself.
Great, thank you. I'm Glenn Schlichting, and first, we are just so honored to have this opportunity to meet with you tonight. We are very long familiar with the outstanding school district and community represented by District 25. And really enjoyed your podcast, the board podcast. I think there were 5, and I thought they were just so outstanding because you reflected on COVID and the difficulties of COVID, and yet your successes and commitments to students and staff and parents in terms of just supporting the real reflections about the balance of your accountability and responsibilities as board members and your roles. I thought was really intriguing, and then. President, you made a great connection with board success and student success, and so it's clear that you are here for students, so thank you so much. I also love the student interviews about the here today and transforming tomorrow, I think it was, but it was just, I just laughed about that. And then finally, your strategic plan. I'm such a data person that I was really intrigued by your dashboard and the focus that you have on the perception data, which just provides such a wonderful foundation for student well-being and academic success. So I was really intrigued with the fact that you really are very data conscious. My own background, I was 36 years in public education. I was a teacher and administrator in nearby Palatine. I ended my career in LaGrange, where I was a superintendent in an elementary district for 13 years. Failed entirely in retirement, have now been with BWP as a senior associate for 8 years, and I'm also an associate professor and chair of the superintendent doctoral program at Concordia University. Just one last comment about the composition of our team. So we are all, have been superintendents, but we are retired superintendents, and therefore we have the flexibility to meet the day-to-day requirements of a search and to be very available. We do involve, as associates, we do have superintendents, seated superintendents right now, and they help us, and they keep us grounded in that process. But again, the bulk of that work will be done right here. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to turn now to the PowerPoint presentation, which you have above you and also in the folders that we passed out. And the first section talks about just a little bit of history of BWP and Associates. We came about as a firm in 2006, but the 4 firms that came together to form BWP and Associates have been doing searches much longer than that. As a matter of fact, one of them was the oldest search firm in the country. I think one of the things that we pride ourselves on is while there are certain things that happen in all searches, we really like to focus on personalizing your search to meet your needs. So once we get to know you and have a planning meeting and get to understand exactly what you're looking for, we will personalize the search to meet your particular needs. It's all about finding someone that will serve your students, and that's what we're looking for. So not to spend too much more time on that, we'll go to a little bit more about who we are on the second page. We have 9 partners. Mark and I are both partners, as he said to you. He is the president of the company, and Glenn is one of our senior associates. We work with about 40 associates from across the country, so that we have not only here in Illinois, but across the country, particularly, as I said, in the Southeast, we're very active. But our main office is in Illinois. And we've listed a number of organizations on the bottom of that page that we have strong connections with. And when I say strong connections, I don't mean we just are members of them. We've had members in our organizations who have served as presidents of these organizations, on the national boards of these organizations. So we're kind of proud of the work that we have done to support the superintendent process. I'm going to turn back to Glenn now as he, on the next page, talks about our track record.
Great. I just want to share some data. A study that I did 3.5 years ago was going to be upgraded and updated, but COVID hit. So that is kind of, I've started that as far as an update of our study, and I think the data will even be better. But at a time when superintendent tenure is about 3 to 4 years, in Illinois, we've had amazing success in that we've had place superintendents that stay and stay in successive contracts. So we're really excited about that. Again, 95% of our candidates placed since 2006 in our study were offered successive contracts. We get really high perception data, satisfaction data from our school boards in terms of follow-up on study, and that perception data comes from satisfaction with candidates, support for the process, communication, attention to day-to-day details, and being available to help and coach through both the interview process and then the onboarding process. And I am also now in the middle of a study, just anecdotal right now, in terms of just studying the candidates, the pool of candidates that we present to a school board. So let's say you hire us, we will present you between 5 and 8 candidates for your first screening. And we're very proud of the diversity of candidates that we have been providing to school boards. And that diversity includes roles, gender, race, ethnicity. So all of that success that we've had in terms of candidates does not come by accident. We really work hard to recruit. We want to present you, we will present you with candidates that are all highly qualified but come from very, very different backgrounds. Then our most important work that we do would be in transition with that superintendent. We assign a formal mentor to a superintendent that spends an entire year. And what does that look like right now? I think I have 11, and that has always extended beyond the first year to just an informal relationship. That relationship includes being a sounding board, calling and checking in, having lunch, sometimes just being an ear when somebody needs to talk through something as far as an issue that they encounter. And so we do mentoring and coaching of superintendents formally, not just informally, but we actually assign a mentor. And then Mark and Ann always mentor the board as well, and spend time making sure and supporting the board in that transition.
The transition.
Yes, because no matter what, the superintendent that comes here, regardless of the background, will come in and make some changes and do some things differently. And so sometimes that takes a board adjustment as well.
Mark?
Other items on, in your, it's the next page.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's like,
There
so
we go.
Got it.
we have a guarantee on our work, the candidates. Ultimately, we present candidates to you, you make the selection. But it's important to us that we present strong, good candidates, make you think a lot before you make your selection.
We
Say,
want to make your job hard.
this is not easy. How do we know? So we do give you a guarantee. If you're unhappy or the candidate's unhappy, up to 2 years, we'll come back and do the search over again just for the cost of some secretarial expenses. Fortunately, we have not had to do that. But we want you to know there is a guarantee. It's just not see us now and never see us again. The mentoring is in there for a year. We won't slate a previously placed candidate in another search for the term of the initial contract. Very important. There's a lot of poaching going on in this business today. The numbers of candidates have gotten smaller. So when we maybe have 40 or 50 candidates for a superintendent search, we may have 25 or 30 today. So within that, people are looking to try and find candidates from other districts. And so we try and get our folks to honor their contract, and we'll get on their case to make sure they do. The next slide is the search process. And again, I'm going to kind of run through this fairly quickly, keeping in mind the time we have, and also keeping in mind that you've seen 3 processes already tonight. You're still wide awake, no glossy eye. This is good. I applaud you for being awake through this. And we're not going to lull you to sleep. We're going to kind of hit on these important factors. So the next slide, which is the search process, we go into our steps. There's about 5 major steps involved. Planning and preparation, that's where we meet with you. We talk about what the calendar will look like, developing a leadership profile, hearing your specific concerns as a board, individual concerns. That's a chance for all of us to do that. Because we're not here going to have a meeting every week to talk about everything. We need to do it and be efficient and not waste your time too. That's why you're hiring us. And so we spend quite a bit of time on that front end. That's the planning meeting. After we get all the details worked out, we do a networking. We launch our networking and recruitment efforts. That's recruiting by word of mouth. We're all local. We know everybody in the area, and we know who's looking, and we know who's people have called us. Are you guys going to interview for the search in District 25? So people have asked us already. So we know how to stir the pot and get the candidates looking for a job, who are looking for this type of a job. And we spend a lot of time one-on-one talking to people in this recruiting process. It's not just put an ad out and wait for people to respond.
Sometimes boards ask us, how much of our job is recruiting for the candidates we present, and I'd say 60 to 70, wouldn't you, Mark?
It's been a lot of
time in trying to find the match for you.
Yeah, very, very much so. The second stage would be launching the networking and recruiting, as we just said, and that's where we're going to approach people as well as respond to people who contact us from the advertisements that we do. And we do extensive, but not over the top. We don't spend a lot of your money on advertising because we know the candidates come mostly from word of mouth and from us talking to them individually. The third stage is candidate assessment. We'll go through that candidate and applicant pool, and we'll look for things that maybe reflect the leadership profile that we've created with you. and we try to match these candidates to this leadership profile. And we'll then screen down. We will do the individual screenings. We'll bring you a candidate slate, as Glenn said, anywhere from 5 to 8 candidates. We're sitting in the neighborhood of 5 or 6 lately, but sometimes the pool dictates that we have another person. We talk that over with you, and if you say no more than this, we'll stick to the number that we have agreed to. We'll conduct board training with all of you. You may have and may not have had the opportunity to be in an interview process like this. We will do a training workshop with you. So we'll spend an hour and a half going over crafting questions, answering any of your questions, then presenting the information about the candidates. So you'll have a packet for each candidate, and you'll take that with you. And then we'll set up the schedule, we'll monitor everything, we'll be available, whatever you need. The fourth step in this search process is you interview the candidates. We will again have you all prepared with questions, with a rubric for scoring if you want. Some boards want that, some like to just take notes. Just up to you. We'll make it easy on you. If you want stakeholder input, we'll help you set that up. And that's a question, excuse me, that's a question we always ask right at the beginning of the planning meeting. Do you want this to be a confidential search or an open search? Confidential search has some value to it. There's a lot of positives. And an open search has value and positives. We don't, suggest one thing or another, but lately we've done a lot of confidential searches. It's increased the pool of candidates maybe twofold.
We could have a hybrid model too, we could talk with you about.
We have a lot of things.
Yeah, we have different things that you could consider.
But that would be part of our planning process. And then in the selection and transition period, we are there for you. Help with the contract. Today, the contract isn't such an easy thing to design with a board and an incoming superintendent. Then the attorneys get involved, but we sometimes play the middle role to make sure everybody's on the same page and there's no tough negotiating right at the start. That's not a good way to start. The next page, whoops.
I was going to say, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you, go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say our fees, the next page, is the consultant fee is $14,900. Our normal fee for superintendent search is $15,900. We've worked in this district before, and I hate to use this word because it kind of sounds a little odd, but we provide a discount for districts that we've worked for before, and there are many. So that reflects a $1,000 discount off the price of a normal search BWP level. And there's a few additional expenses. They're secretarial, and we never know based upon what the district asks us to do. He asks us for some extra things. We estimate it's around $800 to $1,200 possibly. If you don't ask for anything, it won't be anything. So just a little things, we all put that as a contingency in there. Advertising, we use mostly non-cost advertising. So we use things that are free. The Illinois Education Job Bank, our website, several other websites.
LinkedIn, different things.
LinkedIn, we're big LinkedIn users. And so we don't run up a bill. What you see is what you get. And I think that's important. We can stand in front of our boards and say, don't expect to get $10,000.
We don't want you to be surprised.
Isn't going to happen. Is not going to happen. And then, catching our breath, we're trying to keep within our numbers. Why us? And we're not going to read all these most recent searches that we've done. We're everywhere in your neighborhood. East Main 63 last year, Prospect Heights 26. We just finished Park Ridge. People told us Park Ridge was going to be a very difficult search to complete, and we finished it. Call the board president if you want and ask her what she thought of what we've done. Glenn and I worked on that. Ann was in Florida, so she missed that fun. But these neighboring districts all around you, Park Ridge, East Main, as I said, River Trails, Northbrook 30, we just completed District 30 in Northbrook. Please call that board president. we just are very proud of the work that we've done in this area. Wheeling, Phil Pritzker, who's the longtime board president in Wheeling District 21, call him. I guarantee you when you get off the phone, we'll be signing the agreement. So, and then we'll pay him later. But it's all what we call a reflection of satisfaction of what we do. And we're really proud of that. We almost wanted to put that at the front end because it just shows you the reach that we have in the area. We don't do them all, and we don't have the time, the ability to do them all. But you can call anybody here, and I think they will rave about the treatment that they had from us. Whew. Okay.
I think we're ready. 1 minute over.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Is that your timer, Dr. Friedman? No,
Yeah,
thank you
that
so
was our
much.
timer we set not to go
Oh,
over.
we did. Absolutely. We absolutely did that, right?
No, thank you so much. We appreciate the informative presentation. I'll open it up to my colleagues for questions. Liz, thanks for kicking us off.
Madam President, thank you for speaking about your ability to help us set up stakeholder input. I'm wondering what that looks like, who's involved, do you run that, how many sessions, if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yes, we do run that. There are several typical groups involved, and then you have some input into local groups that are important to you as well. I mean, first of all, we always interview each one of you individually. Then we move into focus groups. We interview school administrators, your principals, your teachers, probably groups in different schools to give everybody a chance to be involved. We do parents, PTA, some of the booster clubs that you might identify. We will do now we get more to the local things. Some districts want us to do
Last time we did one at South and one at Thomas.
Yeah.
So we had two
We
sites.
have different
in the
sides
district,
of places so that everybody
Open
could.
meetings.
And then we do the open meetings then, which anybody living in the district could come to. And then we'll look at your organizations. If Rotary is an organization that works well with the district, then you would like us to reach out to them. We can do things like that and invite them to the open meeting specifically. We also launch a community-wide survey. So the reason why I mention all these, it's important to know that you can say to your community that you involved any and everyone who wanted to be involved. And that's the whole point. And the more documentation we get, the better profile we can build, because we use the quantitative from the survey and the qualitative from all the focus groups combined to present that leadership profile we talked about back to you. So it's a big part of the early search and very important to us and to you. We present it back to you in some way, some fashion, so that you can see what it looks like. And again, it guides the rest of the search. Real important part.
And that's a key to our success, is
Right.
that profile.
I think the better we build it, I agree.
Guides our fit. We want to find the person who's a good fit. Those are the candidates that we want to present to you, not just good candidates, but good candidates that want to be here and that fit the profile that has been developed from that community-wide input.
So, very important part.
And a lot of the information that we get in those breakout meetings, it's all reflective of what type of a search you decide you want to go through to begin with. How open do you want it? How much do you want to have of all this input, or do you want to focus it on written input, like the survey responses only? As Ann said, each individual board member, you're all going to get a one-to-one interview with us. So that's our really key piece. We need to know how you think. You're going to make the decision. Yeah. And that school code says it's the school board's decision. But we also want you to understand that some of the feedback we get, it can't always be exactly the way you want it to come out.
Right, well, we tell you.
So when you open the door, yeah, something may fly in that you don't want.
Everybody gets the exact same questions, which we think is important to treat everyone the same.
Thank you very much. Any additional questions? Gina? Once your mic works.
Madam President. So you guys talked a lot, and there's a lot of my board colleagues that we are all data mongers as well. But when we're looking for a leader of this nature, the soft skills, the behavioral skills, the relationship skills are so incredibly important, and they're qualitative, not quantitative, as much as we would, there's many of us that would love them to be quantitative. Can you talk to me a little bit about how do you get to that element to create that perfect fit, please?
It's important.
Sure. In almost all profiles, at the top would be issues of visibility, interpersonal skills, communication skills. Almost inevitably, those are at the top of that list. And so finding candidates that fit that profile, that want to be in schools, that want to be in classrooms, that want to be at events, that want to shake hands and kiss babies, really important. And the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So we do a lot of reference checks. In addition to our interview, we ask questions about what's your day look like? How well do people know you in your district? Those kinds of questions where we get at that strong interpersonal leadership piece, and then we verify that with our own reference checks. Is that really what it looks like for them in their own setting, their own professional setting?
And just to back Glenn up one bit, when he says reference checks, of course we use the ones they give us, but we also, that's where our networking skills have come in, so that we can talk with people we know about that person too as well, and ask some of those important questions to them to make sure what we see is what we're getting is what, you know, that it's a match for what they're telling us.
It's highly likely that, from what we've seen in these last couple of years, it's highly likely that your next superintendent is going to be from Illinois. It's highly likely your next superintendent is going to be from the area. And this is a district that has a good, strong reputation. It's going to be attractive to others in this area, whether they're seated or whether they're in a second or third seat. That's where all this is going to come from. We will know every one of those people professionally, and know either their supervisor or people who work with them. That's where we have an advantage, because we really can sound out those soft skills. If we hear this person is a tyrant with their staff, we're not presenting that person to you. We know that. We may not be able to say it openly. We wouldn't want to slander anybody, but we know what you're looking for, and that's not going to make the checklist.
That's kind of part of what we consider our services to you as well, being able to find those things out.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Madam President?
Yes,
You mentioned the diversity of candidates that you bring to districts. Can you describe in a little more detail your firm's experience attracting candidates from diverse backgrounds?
I can tell you my track record, and you know, that the others chime in too. Now,
we're proud of that.
we work together, but we also work with other teams within the district. So a lot of the work we've done is together, but I individually keep track of mine because that's something that I like to monitor myself. So in the last 5 years of my work, over 60% of the superintendents hired are women and minorities. So that is just, as I said, I keep track of that so I can speak to that, and I'll let the other two speak to their work.
Our firm itself is 50% minority. You know, female, African American, and older white guys. You know, minority or not. Where does that put us, Glenn? You know, but the fact of the matter is that we operate without really thinking about that, because we're so used to presenting diverse slates, having candidates of diverse backgrounds approach us. They feel comfortable talking to us. They know they'll get a fair shake with us. And if they're the right match, they'll be in the finals. And we have done a lot of placement, and again, they've all worked out. No failures, I guess, no mismatches. I think that's the best way to describe it.
And Kevin, I think that's our networking and our well, leave it at the networking, or involvement in lots of organizations. We know a lot of people.
And Kevin, that's an area that I'm studying right now, and so we don't just look at placements, because placements are ultimately a board decision.
Right.
We look at the pool of candidates, and we're somewhere in the 40 to 50% gender, racial, ethnic diversity in terms of presenting to candidates. Just personally, in my last 6 searches, we've had 3 women placed and 2 women of color placed in terms of districts, and most of those districts have been nearby. So we do monitor that and be more formal when I finish that study, but it is something that we study to improve and continue to get better, and also be of service to our district. So I'm really excited about.
Ultimately, it is your decision as the board. Again, as I said earlier, ultimately you'll see a slate of candidates. You have to find the one that fits your profile. We'll create it for you. Fits your profile in your eyes. 7 of you have to come to agreement on that. And that could include people with diverse backgrounds, or it could include people with no experience, people with a lot of, it can go a lot of different ways. And the good part is that you'll have an option, and you'll have some thinking to do with those candidates. You gonna ring the bell on us?
No. We're fine. We actually have time. Any other questions? Glenn, I wanted to ask you, you referred a lot to the studies that you're conducting, which excites me as a researcher,
It's our professor here.
Yes.
Professor.
And congratulations on your doctorate.
Thank you. Are those accessible? Is that something we can access and look at, or are those internal research for your firm?
Well, it's internal research, and so what you see is just some of the summary points of here. I would be willing to share my study and how and some of the methods, along with some of the other data that we've gathered.
And it's mainly around your superintendency placement and numbers, or is it?
Yeah, so since 2006, so we took a look back.
Got it.
Did the study in, I think, 2017, 18. Looked back and kind of followed all of our placements. So looked at our kind of, and it was focused in Illinois, just Illinois, and looked at all of our placements, and then looked at the track record and what happened to that superintendent at placement. So that's some of the data you see in persistence. And then we, because boards turn over, the satisfaction surveys were much more recent in that time. So boards had just finished a search, so that we were actually surveying board members that had participated in the search, as opposed to a new elected body that hadn't been part of that search. We did a survey of boards that had recently placed with BWP.
Okay.
And the other cool part was that we surveyed superintendents and superintendent candidates. So there's only one person that gets a job.
Yeah.
There might be 30 to 50 candidates, and we survey candidates in terms of the way that they perceived our support, communication, because all those people, we want to have a good reputation with superintendents. That's a good thing to attract more candidates to positions. So we interviewed, we surveyed superintendent candidates and got an extremely positive response, and not just those that got the job. So I'd be glad to share some of that data with you.
That's fascinating. And so when you talk about the support piece of that, and you talked about that you placed superintendents for 1 year, and so is that part of the package? Or is that additional?
Yeah,
Part
something.
All included.
We think your success is our success, and I think we all enjoy staying in touch with the superintendents we've placed and making sure that we're in contact with them. So that's just something we do.
And you just asked a question that I could go past our time, because I get so excited about talking about that. So some examples of that would be, again, it's a formal relationship.
One of
I
us.
have, I'm going to talk about my own experiences as a mentor, some of the work that I've done. We had a board that was struggling with their superintendent evaluation. And superintendent and board president reached out to me. I sat with them and presented, because that's an area of research for me personally, and presented them with some models and talked through that process. That would have been a mentoring issue that came from a superintendent. A district recently has done some systems work and didn't really want to go out and get a high-priced consultant in terms of their system work, in terms of really establishing some SMART goals and some real strong evidence impact. And another area kind of research for me, I sat with them and kind of worked through that. In addition to a superintendent calling me and saying, wow, the board is looking at doing this. Glenn, what do you think? Or I'm struggling with a staff issue. Glenn, what do you think? A really kind of outside person to really help in that transition. And we all do that, but we do assign a single person to a candidate.
And that comes back to one of the questions we had about relationships and the soft skills, and that's part of, I think, what we try to establish too, not only with you, but with our candidates, so that we can, that it's a trusting relationship from all directions, that we're able to go ahead and mentor and talk with the superintendent that's being placed. I think they trust us. It's important to us.
And it lasts, that is formal 1 year, but once
We're
we establish that relationship, that relationship goes on.
And we do functions, we invite them to everything. So they mix with other new superintendents. You know, there's a sense of camaraderie. We throw little events, little dinners, just for the new superintendents, share things. Nothing formal like the state associations do, but something that we have enough of recently placed people that we can bring them together and they learn from each other.
Yeah. And so that's fascinating. You know, you do this for a year. It's a formal relationship, you say. So does that include coaching and a 360 eval with the cabinet, principals?
We don't have any caps on this.
And as well as developing high-performance teams, you know, for the superintendent and so forth.
That would be more of a formal, we tease on that when there is a superintendent really, like I described, the district that was really intrigued with systems and beginning to put in really more evidence-based decision-making and more clear direction. That I helped with informally. If it would have gotten to me spending 10 hours a week in that district, that wouldn't have been appropriate for that role. So we tease on that, but we don't go into developing teams in the district with the superintendent.
The example I would give where we did, in Skokie District 73.5, we assisted them in hiring a new superintendent. Then they hired us to fill all their administrative positions, assistant superintendent, principal. I mean, we were there a lot and helped form the team in conjunction with the new superintendent. But she came in with not knowing anybody. We knew a lot more people in the area, so we worked with her to build that team.
So the other piece of that is it's not just the three of us that you see. If the new superintendent needs an area of expertise from our managing partner at Deb Hill, we'll call her up and say, would you mind talking with the new superintendent in District 25? And so we have a lot of, if the resource is a little bit out of our expertise, there's somebody else in our firm that would step in and make that phone call for us as well. Because we're a team. Again, your success is our success.
And that's not, so when we talk about mentoring, it's not just superintendents without experience. So somebody who has multiple years experience that comes to Arlington District 25 and comes here, they're going to be inundated with, they do things differently, and I need a sounding board. I need to talk through. The board does it this way, and I'm thinking about maybe approaching the president and talking about maybe doing it this way. Glenn, what do you think? Is it, can we talk through that?
Yeah, no, for sure. And of course, success of our next superintendent is key to us, and that proactive professional development kind of stance is important.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much. Seeing no other questions, we really appreciate. Gina, sorry, you're blinking.
Gina?
Okay.
Go ahead, Gina.
Madam
We're here.
Okay, this is related but more contractual relationship between the organizations. So on the BWP guarantee, you guys had noted that you would not slate a placed superintendent for the term of the initial contract. Are you open to that being up to 6 years? So it might be initial and secondary.
I've done that with Bob McBride.
Yeah, I think we'd
Yeah.
be willing
We
to
talked with you about it.
expand that, yeah.
I've done, there was a board I worked with that had a similar request, and we were able to work with that.
Is there something magical about the 6? Because no one can get more than 5 years
I
in a contract.
would ask for 10, but, right, let's.
And honestly, we
I'm
want
just
to,
curious, we're just kind
That's a
of,
great negotiation. That was good, yeah. that was
and
good.
honestly,
You
we
had already come
we
down.
want them to
Yeah,
stay
yeah.
10 too.
Yeah, I like that, I like that.
yeah. We're long-termers.
Yeah.
17,
I was only in 2 districts
13.
in my life.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, we don't understand people jumping all over from place to place, but it's a different world today.
It is. Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Okay,
Anything else?
thank you so much
You
for being.
didn't stump us.
Not too much.
You're right there. Since we went over on our questions, you did fine on your timing. So thank you. We really appreciate
Thank
the
you.
extra few minutes you
Appreciate it
spent
very
with
much.
us.
Thanks for the
And we look forward to getting back to you. And we're glad you don't have long drives back home.
Oh,
No, we
yeah, I
don't.
know. We said we're not going to do any Bears jokes about downtown Arlington Heights or anything like that. So we got through the whole night without reflecting on what downtown Arlington Heights is going to be. And we'd be going down there and having a brew at the nearby Chicago Bears Bar and Tap or something like that.
Yeah, well,
Thank you,
go
Board.
enjoy our downtown. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Board.
Good to see all of you. Oops.
Get up.
So we're going to save more time today because I believe we don't have any public comments. So at this point, I'll ask my colleagues to kind of, if you work through your rubric, take we'll take like, say, 3 to 5 minutes to work on your rubric, take a little break, and then we'll come back, discuss each one of the presenters today, and kind of hear your thoughts on that, okay? So we'll take like 5 minutes just to jot down our notes and get our thoughts together and kind of regroup at 8:20, okay? Does anybody need more time? Okay. So here's what I'm thinking, and chime in if you think that, to kind of improve our process here. But as we go around and discuss our top firm choice, and some of you may be on the fence like I am to kind of hear in and listen into others will help kind of get kind of more input. So if anybody's ready to share, I have also as board president been doing kind of informal, right from the first meeting that we had, have been doing informal background checks and have kind of information that as a FYI I had shared. So now we have 4 firms here and based on new information that I had. So we'll go around and I'm going to be really curious to hear. And I also really want to lean on Rich, because Rich was here during the last superintendent search process. Brian, were you here?
No, I didn't want to say anything, but I think he was mistaken.
Yeah.
I came in right after that.
Yeah.
But he was,
Yeah.
I'm a little better looking than Dave.
But on a one-on-one, I found it informative because Rich has done this process before, so it was informative to kind of, on a one-on-one basis as a board member, I wanted to hear how that went. So thank you, Rich, for sharing that. But so whoever's ready to share, Rich, I'm looking at you.
Just to be clear, are we just saying, hey, this is who we would choose?
Yes.
And why?
Yes, I think would be most appropriate to go with who your top choice is and who you found the most positive would be a good connection. And of course, it's always an option. So tonight, the goal is to come down to the firm. However, if we are not, we've seen 4 firms today. If we are not, if we feel like we still want to look at other firms, that is also a possibility. So we kind of have, options here.
That's not a possibility. Let's just put that out there, Rick.
It's not a possibility?
No, not in my book.
Not in your book, okay.
Maybe in yours.
Madam President?
Yes.
Yeah, I like your idea, but I'm wondering then if whatever order we go, it might feel like we're voting. And then if you're at the end, you might feel like, well,
Yeah.
So maybe another way to get there is we could go in the order they are presented, and for instance, McPherson, Jacobson, does anyone have them at the top? Would you like to speak to that?
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
And then if no, then we'll just go right to School Exec Connect, and people can speak or not if that's their top.
But eventually, we got to come back to them and say, this is.
Oh, no, understood. I just didn't want to bias the discussion.
Okay.
And give everyone an opportunity if they feel it's.
Okay, so
That's just a suggestion.
we'll go from the top, McPherson and Jacobson, and then kind of go down the line, and then, so I think at the end, we'll get to the same goal, but without any biases. Thanks, Greg, for that. Any other suggestions?
I did have one, we used this
in the past was, and it's not voting, but gets to, thank you, Lonnie, but gets to the point of where we'd all write it down on a piece of paper, give it to you, you'd look at it, hey, if we got 4, we got 4, then we talk about it that way. But that way there's no super secret who's doing what. You're getting just a piece of paper that says, this is my top choice. And that way, if you see there's all 7 with 1, well, shit, I think we have an answer, or if there's something else. So.
Well, we're essentially doing the same thing, just about the paper.
Yeah, but the paper may get us down to a faster results.
Yeah.
Right, meaning there's 2,
Yeah.
there's only 2 we should talk about. But.
And I also want to be, I like that, Rich. I also want to be, everybody who came here today was extremely well informative and worked really hard to put a great presentation for us. So I want to be sensitive to that too. So I do like the paper idea to see just who rises to the top. Is any thoughts on that? Is that okay if we?
Blank piece of paper.
Yeah, we have our blank piece of paper. So maybe put your top choice and then send it my way, and then we'll see if top rises.
Madam President,
Yes.
are we writing our names or just the name of the firm?
No name.
Okay, just wanted to confirm.
Top 1 or top 2? Is there any reason to do? You don't need to, do you? Yeah, I know.
Okay. Brian, if you could help me tally, is that okay?
Did I get them all?
No, not yet.
Did I get yours? It's in here somewhere? It's pretty easy to tell.
But,
Two,
but if you're in the middle, so
five,
can I put two votes in?
six. I'll shuffle them.
No, but, no, this is a sincere question. If I'm in between two, and I really do want to hear perspectives, could I put in two votes?
No,
No, okay.
sorry.
Stacey, I know you've got, maybe you've gone through this process many times. Is there any advice that you have for us before we continue our process? Or did we?
Look at that face. Did I miscount? Sorry. 1, 2.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's 5 and 2. Yes, it is 5. I just miscounted.
Maybe there was one that only got one vote.
No.
Go ahead, Stacy.
So I would just say you have 5. So is there information that the 2 who had BWP as their top choice want to hear that might?
Is anybody going to change their vote based upon that conversation? I don't know. I mean, that'd be my only kind of
I
question.
mean, you have a super majority,
Yeah, we do.
basically.
Yeah.
I don't know that it.
Madam President?
Yes, Kevin.
I am comfortable in sharing that the 2 that Brian just mentioned were my top 2 choices, and they were only apart by 1 point on the rubric. So I feel very good about that outcome.
I'm right
just,
there.
Just in general, as a member of the board, that we are in agreement on those 2 being our top choices.
Yeah,
Okay,
I mean, I'll
thank you,
just,
Kevin.
anecdotally, I'll just share that I'm in the same boat. I chose BWP, quite frankly, because they brought us Lori. So that's kind of what put me over but they were very close.
Thanks for that, Brian. Any other thoughts?
Madam President,
Yes, Gina.
I will offer on the line to that those 2 were my top 2 as well.
Yeah.
I think a differentiator to contemplate if you want to dive into the area of conversation. I like the local flair that the 2 offer. I think that the local expertise will be very helpful and very valuable in the area. I don't think, from a compare and contrast, I mean, they're pretty much equal on I think what they bring to the table. I will offer that fiscally, I think that if there's not a super outstanding distinguishing factor, fiscally, BWP is a much more intriguing proposal for getting more than what we get from school exec, in that school exec's mentoring was above. And BWP was included. So just some compare and contrast notes that I had on the various 2, because they were my top 2.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. I'll quickly jump in. You know, I want to say, you know, I know that local came up before when we were making the decision of who to invite, but I do think it was, you know, as we did invite 2 that were not local, but I want to say I'm glad that we did, because we kind of covered all our bases to look at, hey, what do you get if you have a national firm? And I want to say, you know, the national, all of them were extremely well prepared, and I'm still glad that we invited them. And at the end of the day, we're going, you know, majority local, and I agree with that decision. So I just wanted to say that I don't want to think we're wasting anybody's time here. Like if local is what we were looking for. However, we kept ourselves open to, hey, what would be good? What does the other firms, what does the national firm offer to us? So I'm glad that we were open about that. Any other thoughts? I know Liz and Rich.
Madam President, so school exec and BWP were my top two, but school exec went out higher. One of the reservations I have with BWP, only from the experience that I have with them, is in their community engagement aspect of it. We're not as robust as, at least, you know, school execs talks about, right? They focused more on the internal piece of it, meaning within the district versus anything with the outside the district, and then bringing that together. I thought, again, as I reflect on it, some of the comments, or maybe some of the way they brought in the comments from the feedback, right, of presenting, here's what the person that we want, was not necessarily aligned all the time with what that feedback was. Now, not to say that Lori's good, bad, or indifferent, but it just that was more limiting that I thought. So they relied much heavily more on their own personal word of mouth, or, you know, what they've heard and seen, versus then actively going out and finding that right candidate. So.
Thanks, Rich. Liz, as we look at why we got, you know, why the top pick was a top pick.
Madam President and the board, I was wondering if anyone has had the opportunity to speak anecdotally with the districts that have used either two of these firms recently.
Not, well, actually only BWP, because I recalled that they were the ones that we used for Lori. So I had a conversation with Dave Page, just kind of more or less really just about them, just as one of the proposals that we got. But I don't have the same anecdotal feedback for school exec, so that's another reason that, you know, my top choice was BWP. But there was one other point I was going to make. In their proposal, you know, again, one of the reasons I chose BWP was so many of the recent placements that they did are our neighboring districts, you know, and that for me, that kind of weighed a little bit more heavily on it.
Yes, I did informally speak to board presidents in the area, and I want to kind of state positives as far as what was their top choices. And so yes, I did speak to them, and therefore went with the choice that I did. So I think it's coming up with School Exec Connect as far as the top choice. But yes, I did speak to board presidents in the area.
Madam President, in response to Liz's question also, just in the interest of full disclosure, my current district of employment, which is Park Ridge Niles District 64, was one of BWP's references, and they even, I think it was Dr. Friedman, mentioned their recent experience, and that now I'm not privy to any specific details about how that process went, other than I've heard through word of mouth that both, the board in District 64 made the decision to hire the next superintendent after the election, but before new board members were seated. And they did include newly elected board members in the process of meeting with candidates, but not in the process of voting or hiring. And from what I've been told, all of both the outgoing, continuing, and incoming board members were almost unanimous in the decision that was made to hire our next superintendent. So they seemed satisfied in the outcome in that regard, just again, to share.
And I think it's also, thank you, Kevin. I also think, right, we researched, every firm that's come here today is a great firm, right? We've researched all great firms, and we also, the 7 of us kind of decided to bring these folks on. And so we won't, everybody's going to be good. At the end of the day, who are we going to work with best? It seems like our board has made a decision, and now it's really important to kind of go with that process, learn. I think tonight we've also learned a lot about the process itself from what the firms were talking about. So, and sometimes the decision, like when I've talked to board presidents, sometimes the decision of whether they like a firm or not like a firm is based on, do they love their superintendent that was brought forward, right? A lot of homework is going to be based on us as well. Every firm has kind of similar processes as we've seen today. So if we were any of these 4 firms, we would not go wrong. They were all excellent. So now it's just based on who do we need to work with, knowing our community and so forth. So like Brian said, you know, we don't want, if we wanted to, so I want to hear from the board. Do we want to hear from other firms? Because there's other local firms. We only looked at 2. Or based on these 2 local firms, because I've heard that we want to go local, more so today. So there's other local firms. Do we want to look at other local firms, or do we want to go ahead and move with the decision?
Madam President, I'd like to hear from Greg.
Go ahead, Greg.
Madam President,
Yes.
I will honor that request. First, I just wanted to say that I really appreciate everyone's willingness to go through this step in the process and going forward with a firm, and it was very educational about giving an overview of the process through their eyes, all 4 of those firms, and then going through these. So I feel better prepared walking through those next steps, even though the firm will be a crucial partner in that. To your question about do we want to hear from more, and I think you know, there's a benefit to limiting our choices. You know, when you walk into the grocery store and you see 20 different versions of a certain cereal you want to get, it's like, how do you pick? And they're all probably really good. And this is a much more important decision. So my fear is if we were to then start bringing in local firms, now we're going to be down to a 20-point rubric to really differentiate them. And as you said, they're all really well-qualified firms. We're trying to find the best fit for us, and there's a sense from the board right now that we found a firm that fits.
No, thank you for that, Greg. Gina?
Point of clarification. Do we need a formal motion and a formal vote? Oh, you can't, you're right.
Oh, sorry, we can direct what we're going to do next time.
Okay, that was why I said point of clarification. Thank you.
That's what we all.
Yeah, what would happen, the next step here is that, you know, the next step would be for us to have Stacy secure a contract with the search firm of our choice so that we can officially approve working with that firm at one of our next board meetings. However, since we did kind of, I don't believe that we have to out loud say who each of us voted on, that we did kind of
No, I think you just need to give me direction if there is a firm you'd like me to pursue getting a contract with, and if there is anything about that contract you want. I know there was a question asked with one firm about would they be willing to put language in that I think another firm had in there, but I don't know if there's any specific requirements in the contract. The board can share that with me, otherwise I can gather a contract. I would suggest to, I guess the question would be, do you want it for a June 13th, or are you looking at the July board meeting?
Yeah, I'll speak for myself. I think the sooner the better, June 13th. I want to get going with this whole process. And then also, but I want to double back on, go back to Gina's question. There is no legal requirement of a vote of who we all voted for, correct?
No, because you'll vote on the contract.
Okay, sounds good. So yeah, a contract for June 13th, and seems like the majority of the board has agreed on School Exec Connect and for you to work on that contract. Are there any specifics that we want to give Stacy for the contract with School Exec Connect?
Madam President?
Yes.
I don't know that I have an ask, but maybe a clarification. So Stacy, if I remember right, like there was an option for School Exec Connect about a background, and he strongly suggested we do that. How does that work in terms of is that something you need direction for us now, or it's in the contract and we can elect at a different time?
What I can do is get the contract with what's included by contract and what would be optional with additional fees, and then provide that information to the board so that when you vote on the contract, you can choose if there's anything additional you want to pay for, or just approve a contract as without any additional items.
Thank you.
One piece of information, I don't know if it goes in the contract, because of course we didn't meet, School Exec Connect only had one person come today and referred to another individual. So in the contract, do we have, how many members of our team, like some members, there were 3 people and then there was admin staff and so forth. So I just want to know what is a full-fledged team would be working with School Exec Connect? So maybe it's in their proposal, but I want that to be clear, like how many people will be working with us, supporting us through this search? Because today we just met Tim. So if that could be clarified, and then that's it. Anything else? Okay, we accomplished what we came here for. I know this meeting is being recorded, so I just want to say for the benefit of the 4 firms that came here today, and for the community to know that we're really grateful for all the 4 firms that came here today. They all did an excellent job. We picked the best firms nationwide and locally, and the board, I think, has worked really hard this evening to kind of launch off this process to get the best firm for District 25, because we hold a lot of responsibility and importance in finding the best next superintendent for District 25. So thank you to my colleagues today for this important work. Thank you, Lana, for all the getting all the appointments going, and Stacy for all your support today, and everybody that's in the background, Adam and Brad, for making this meeting happen. And we did it. Thanks a lot. Good evening. And I need a motion to adjourn the regular meeting.
Madam President,
Yes, Rich.
I move that we adjourn our regular meeting.
Okay.
Or a special meeting. It is a special meeting, right?
A regular meeting, yes. Please can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Gina. And all in favor? Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody.